Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, 16-year-old Sam had lackadaisically dozed off on his Aunt Beth's very comfortable white leather couch, which felt like being on a bed. It was so sumptuously cosy. Indeed, everything about the glamorous layout and decor of the Valinskis' very stunning all-wooden home, that rather resembled a bewitching Swiss chalet, overlooking prepossessing views of heavily forested countryside, was always so warmly welcoming to the young teenager. Sam always felt as if he was on a weekend retreat whenever he stayed with both his uncle and aunt. The house had been built and designed fastidiously by the Valinskis themselves, with no expense spared, but then again they were reasonably well off, so they could easily afford what Sam would describe as the benefits of enjoying the good life, without having to worry very much about the crippling debt that afflicted so many. Aunt Beth had married a very wealthy entrepreneur and had never ever looked back, but at the same time she had also never forgotten her humble roots and was well aware of the privileges that blessed her life, that gave her so many opportunities that others so sadly lacked. Sam's parents, who both lived and worked in Detroit, were not as fortunate financially and often struggled to pay the bills on time. But Aunt Beth would always insist on giving Sam's mother cash handouts whenever she could, as she was very close to her older sister and knew all too well what it was like to struggle, having experienced hardships when she was growing up herself. Aunt Beth had been raised in a very modest home in the Tennessee mountains, with two devoted parents and her sister Julie. What the family had lacked in money, they more than made up in love, as both Beth and Julie had been blessed with childhoods that were so close to perfect, well, as close as you could get, that is. Aunt Beth was very humble and knew a great deal about living hand to mouth. She never wanted her opulent prosperity to diminish her character in any way and turn her into a spoilt, self-entitled brat. She would always say to Sam's mother, "It's a gift to be able to help you, Julie. That's the way I see it. If one has more money than one needs, then you help other people, don't you?" Sam enjoyed spending the occasional rather frivolous, decadent weekend at the Valinskis' house. They were incredibly good to him. They spoilt him generously, bought him trendy gifts, and treated him as if he was their beloved older son. Mr. Valinski, his uncle, paid for Sam's education at an expensive school in Detroit, as his parents could not afford the school fees there. So Sam believed he was rather indebted to the Valinskis for their kindness towards him, something that his mother never ever let him forget. The Valinskis' house was called Point of View, surrounded with luxurious comforts you would find in a grand hotel, including a sauna and a hot tub. The Valinskis obviously enjoyed pampering themselves. Aunt Beth's refrigerator was stuffed to the brim with expensive top-of-the-range food that Sam would never find at home, because on the one hand his mother was not remotely domesticated, nor could she afford to splash out on expensive food labels. Let's just say, in their modest suburban home in Detroit, Sam would always have to help himself to the predictable stale bread and mouldy old cheese in the refrigerator, along with any leftovers from the previous night, which was also terribly unexciting and predictable, unless of course his mother had ordered a Chinese takeaway the night before. Mrs. Walensky's fridge was another world in itself, galaxies away from the fridge at home, as it boasted French champagne, a range of interesting drinks including cinnamon Coca-Cola, cherryade, and club cream soda. There were exotic yogurts, delicious salamis and gourmet meats, honey-glazed ham, truffles, caviar, smoked mussels, black squid ink pasta, interesting sauces and salads, so it was always good staying with the Walenskys. It was a gastronomic experience, to say the very least. Sam had only intended to close his eyes for a few brief seconds on this unassuming Saturday evening when he was babysitting for the Walenskys, but he soon realized he must have been asleep for a while longer than he'd actually envisaged. Well, a lot longer, actually. It seemed like a couple of hours had slipped by, as fast as butter melting away on a warm crumpet. The carriage clock on the mantel over the fireplace registered 10 past 10. Goodness gracious me, it really was rather late. How long had he been asleep for? He had not even checked up on his cousin Billy. For the last 3 hours or so, it would seem. A sense of self-condemning shame washed over him, for if his Aunt Beth were to see him now, she'd be bitterly disappointed in him. Sam had faithfully assured his mother's pedantic older sister, Aunt Beth, that no, of course, he wouldn't fall asleep while watching over his little 7-year-old cousin Billy. "You may think I'm fussy, Sam," Aunt Beth had told her nephew, in a very matter-of-fact voice, "but I just can't help myself. I hate being away from little Billy, even for a second. I'm so dreadfully protective over him. I see other mothers, you know, behaving so nonchalantly towards their own children. But I'm sorry, I just can't be that easy-going about taking care of my son. It's a full-time responsibility, let me tell you, that I take very, very seriously indeed. It only takes a second for things to go badly wrong. I'm painfully only too well aware of that fact. From bitter experience, of course. When Billy gets older, I will loosen my formidable cast-iron hold over him. But at this stage of his life, kids can get into so much trouble. It's so easy for a child to put their hand by mistake in a waste disposal unit, or get a burn from putting their hand in a bowl of boiling jam. The list goes on and on. You need to have eyes in the back of your head when you're minding children, as young as Billy. I can understand, Aunt Beth, why you're so devoted to little Billy. He's a lovely boy. Sweetheart, Billy is the only child I will ever have. I hope you realize that. It was an absolute miracle I had him at all, if you must know. When I fell pregnant with Billy, my gynecologist at the time assured me that I was physically completely incapable of conceiving. So me and your Uncle Dylan had resigned ourselves to never having children on our own, and that was desperately hard for the both of us, let me tell you. That must have been tough for you, Aunt Beth. You would have been a brilliant mother, because you are a brilliant mother. That's very kind of you to say, dear. Tough doesn't begin to describe it, though, Sam. There are no words. Me and your Uncle Dylan wanted children very badly, with all of our hearts we did. It was our absolute dream to have at least over 4 children. When I heard I'd never be able to conceive or have children of my own, it pretty much destroyed me. You can ask your mother all about that. Your mother, Julie, knows how many times I would phone her in the middle of the night, crying my heart out about how grievously unfair it was that I would remain childless for the rest of my life. Your poor mother had to put up with all my despair, but she held me up in very difficult, tumultuous times, let me tell you. She was the best older sister I could have ever asked for. Do you know, she even offered to have a baby for me and Dylan, which was such a generous thing for her to do. I was so incredibly humbled by her kindness. My mother offered to have a baby for you? I asked, sounding confounded. She did indeed, said Aunt Beth. I suppose she never told you that. You see how special your mother is. She was selflessly generous. I was tempted to accept that offer, you know, I would have given anything to have a child, but shortly after your mother had volunteered to have a baby for me. One day I'd miraculously discovered I was pregnant. Even the gynecologist said it was an absolute miracle. I do recall how confounded his face was. He was utterly astonished and called the nursing staff in the room to see the scans. They couldn't believe it either. But yes, I was pregnant.
Well, that's incredible, Aunt Beth. You must have been so happy about that.
Well, actually, I was more fearful than happy, Sam. I couldn't predict, you see, how my pregnancy would ultimately go. You see, I was so desperately afraid that I wouldn't be able to carry Billy to full term, or that I might have a spontaneous miscarriage. I wasn't out of the woods yet. My gynecologist had made that perfectly clear to me. If the truth be told, I don't think my gynecologist was very optimistic about a positive outcome. He was negative throughout my whole pregnancy. But when your little nephew was born, it was without doubt the happiest day of my entire life. Me and your Uncle Dylan were like two kids who'd broken into a candy store and stolen all the best sweets. We couldn't stop smiling, to such an extent that our jaws began to ache. I've never had a problem like that, a painful jaw, I mean, because I was smiling so much. Let's just say when Willie was born, he was a bundle of joy. I couldn't take my eyes off him. I was completely smitten. I knew I was the luckiest woman in the entire world that came so close to not having a baby at all. I hope you can understand that, Sam. Why Billy means so desperately much to me. He is my miracle child that I cannot afford to ever take for granted for 1 second. You need to make absolutely sure, Sam, you watch over him like a hawk for me while we're away on Saturday night. Do you think you can do that for me? I'm putting all my trust in you. I know it's a big responsibility to undertake, but do you think you can do it?
You don't have to worry, Aunt Beth, about a single thing. I'll take great care of little Billy, I promise you. I'll read him a very nice bedtime story to keep him entertained. I'll tuck him up in bed. I'll give him his dinner at 5 o'clock sharp. You've given me his timetable, and I promise you I'll follow everything to the letter. I won't let you down, Aunt Beth.
You're a good boy, Sam. You really are,
said Aunt Beth, taking out a tissue from her purse and blowing her nose into it very hard. For a moment Sam thought his aunt was actually crying. He could tell for her the idea of leaving Billy in the house under his charge was something Aunt Beth was loath to do. But it wasn't as if she had a choice in the matter. In the end, I think she thought it was better her 16-year-old nephew look after her child than a childminder she knew absolutely nothing about.
It's just, she stuttered anxiously, if anything bad were to happen to little Billy, I'd never forgive myself, never. Do you understand that, Sam?
The look on Sam's aunt's face was very solemn. It made Sam feel a tad apprehensive about having agreed to be babysitting his 7-year-old cousin. But it was only for one evening. I mean, what could possibly go wrong during one evening of babysitting? Aunt Beth was so overly cautious when it came to scrupulously watching over little Billy that even his mother Julie said she was over the top.
That sister of mine worries about everything, she had told Sam. She might have a lot of money, you know, but she has no peace. She's always frantically worrying that something bad is going to happen to little Billy. I tell her she needs to relax and let her hair down from time to time. We can't police our children 24/7. But you know what your aunt's like.
It was true. Aunt Beth was obsessed over Billy's safety and welfare. She was like a mother elephant that would trample on anyone coming near her young. On one occasion, Aunt Beth thought a stranger in the supermarket queue who was standing behind her at the checkout was looking at her son inappropriately. She had instantly believed the man was a predator. You heard so much these days, didn't you, about young children being abducted and the undercover, guileful child trafficking that was taking place around the globe that no one seemed to want to talk about. So alarmed was Aunt Beth that she had promptly abandoned her shopping trolley in the middle of her shop, in a blind panic. Then she had hightailed it straight back to her car, carrying 4-year-old Billy on her hip. while leaving the woman at the checkout, looking somewhat bemused. To her horror, she found the stranger who had been behind her in the supermarket queue, whom she had tried to escape, was now running after her, waving her down. "Excuse me, ma'am," he was calling her. "Excuse me, ma'am." "Go away," she had cried. "Get away from me, will you?" She had flapped her hands around like a frantic seagull, as if trying to escape the clutches of a resolutely determined coyote. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you. I was wondering, is this your son's by any chance?" the man had said breathlessly, rushing up to the car and handing her the little toy aeroplane. "I think this might possibly belong to your son. I noticed he was playing with the plane in the supermarket queue. Then he dropped it because he got distracted by packets of red licorice on offer." "Oh, that is his. Thank you so very much," said Aunt Beth, growing as red as a beetroot. She took the aeroplane from the kind stranger rather bashfully and handed it back to her 4-year-old son. "What do you say to this kind gentleman, Billy, for giving you back your aeroplane? You were too busy getting distracted by the red licorice to know that you'd actually dropped it on the supermarket floor." "Thank you, sir," Billy had said. "I didn't even know I'd left it behind. I love my aeroplane." "Well, I wanted to give it back to its rightful owner," said the man. He looked at Aunt Beth kindly and said, "Ma'am, I'm dreadfully sorry. I didn't mean to scare you by running after you like I did. But I didn't want your son to lose his aeroplane. When I was his age, I would have been absolutely mortified to lose such a quality toy like this. Not that I had many toys. By the looks of things, it's a very special aeroplane." Little Billy boasted, "I can fly it, sir." "I'm sure you can," said the man. He shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. "I noticed you forgot your shopping back there, ma'am. You didn't finish buying your stuff. But I told the teller you were probably in a tearing hurry and remembered something you needed to do. That's happened to me before in the middle of a shop, I have to say." "You're absolutely right about that. That's exactly what happened. I remember there was something I had to do." She lied. How could she tell this kind gentleman that she'd run away from him because she had assumed he was looking at her son inappropriately? "I'd better get back to my shopping, ma'am," the man said. "Have a good day." "Same to you," she had said rather sheepishly. Aunt Beth had felt so dreadfully ashamed to overreact in the way she'd done, but that's what happens when you're overly protective towards your children. You allow an untethered imagination to get the better of you, and allow yourself to believe that anybody else's intentions towards your offspring are nefarious. "But of course, Aunt Beth," Sam had reassured his aunt, for what must have been the zillionth time. "I promise you've got nothing to worry about at all. I told you, for the 100th time, I'll take great care of Cousin Billy. I'm a night owl anyway. It's no problem for me to stay awake all night and watch over him. If it makes you feel better, I'll do just that, and I'll call you if I need to." His Aunt Beth had taken his hand and given it a tight squeeze. "Oh, I'm so relieved to hear you say that. Your mother was right about you, Sam. You're a dependable young man, even if you are only 16. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be accompanying my husband to his best friend's 40th birthday party. It's only because I can trust in you to take good care of little Billy that I've actually decided to go. Your uncle really wants me to go with him to this party, you see. He's got to do a speech for his very best friend. They grew up together, you know. He's feeling rather nervous and apprehensive about it. So I need to be there to support him, cheer him along, if you know what I mean." "But why is he nervous, Aunt Beth? I didn't know Uncle Dylan would be nervous about anything. Uncle Dylan is so accomplished and successful. I didn't think anything would intimidate him." "That's what your uncle probably wants people to believe. He's a self-made success story. But just like anyone else, he also has his insecurities, you know, but he hides them well. Do you know, Billy, that some people find public speaking is one of the most terrifying things to do? And it's like that for your uncle. But I dare say he will deliver that speech very well and overcome his fear, as he always does. But I promise you, while he's doing his speech, all these people will think that he is so confident and self-assured. But in reality his heart will be flapping like a bird's when it's caught in a cat's jaws. That's how terrified he will be. I can assure you of that.
Well, I don't blame Uncle Dylan for being terribly afraid of public speaking, said Sam reflectively. I hate standing up in front of the class and doing a speech. But in front of 100 people at a party, that's a huge deal. But I'm sure Uncle Dylan will do a fine speech. I have faith in him.
I'm in no doubt he will deliver a very good speech indeed, Aunt Beth agreed. I share your confidence in him, Sam. Anyway, the great news is, next time you come to stay with us here, I will have an alarm installed so you can get some good sleep while minding Billy. I should have had an alarm installed a long time ago, but I kept putting it off. We did have a few alarm companies coming around to the house, but I couldn't for the life of me decide which one to choose. So in the end, we didn't go with any of them, and I deeply regret that now.
But why would you need to get an alarm, Aunt Beth? It's safe around here, isn't it? I mean, if you were living in Detroit, where I live, well, I could understand you getting an alarm. Lots of people have alarms there. But out here, there's a tiny population, probably zero crime. So what are you worrying about?
You can never be too careful, Sam, wherever you live in the world. I don't even care where it is. Especially if you have valuable stuff in your home, which we do. I learnt the importance of being vigilant a long time ago, you know. I know you think I'm probably very silly and overwrought. But you know, after I came so close to losing little Billy, never again. Can you understand what I'm saying, Sam?
You don't have to explain anything to me, Aunt Beth. I do understand, said Sam politely. He knew exactly why Aunt Beth was so protective over little Billy. Not only because he was the only child she'd ever have, but on one occasion her little boy had nearly drowned in their pond, when Beth had turned her back on him for what must have seemed like a few seconds, when distracted by a phone call from the man who was coming over to the house to repair their washing machine, that was spraying water all over the kitchen floor and creating a catastrophic mess. Little Billy had been 4 years old at the time. Aunt Beth did not know how little Billy had fallen into the water, but she had dived in after him unhesitantly, wearing long leather boots and a glamorous navy blue silk blouse. She feared the worst. She had searched for her son frantically in the dark, murky water, with a feeling of ominous dread consuming her, for she knew that it would only take minutes for her child to drown, and the thought of losing Billy after everything she'd gone through to have him was utterly dreadful, too dreadful to contemplate. She cursed herself for how long she'd been distracted by that phone call with the plumber, talking about a meaningless washing machine that she believed he had installed incredibly badly. It must have been longer than she had imagined. She had felt an icy chill of water seeping through her clothes as she navigated her way through the water, guided only by her instincts to propel her towards her little son. In seconds she had located him and pulled his limp, lifeless body out of the pond. In a trice she began to administer CPR on him, and thankfully little Billy began to regurgitate the water from his lungs by coughing and spluttering. Aunt Beth had been so relieved to hear a noise coming out of her son's throat, because it meant he was alive. She had been unable to believe that he had come so close to losing his tiny little life, and even the emergency services said as much. They said that she was very lucky that her son had survived. Once the emergency services assured Aunt Beth that Billy would live to see another day, she realized how close she'd come to losing him, and from thenceforth had refused to trust anyone in his charge. Aunt Beth was very glamorous, slender and attractive. She sometimes looked like a fish out of water in the Michigan countryside, because regardless of the weather, be it rain, sleet or shine, Aunt Beth looked immaculately turned out, as if she was about to take a casual stroll down the red carpet in Hollywood. She was one of those glamorous women that look good every single day of the week. When she was growing up in the Tennessee countryside, she had scant clothes in her wardrobe, because her parents were not well off. So maybe her privileged wardrobe, and the freedom to wear whatever she chose, was something she did not want to take for granted. Sam privately suspected that if the fire brigade arrived at Aunt Beth's in the middle of the night, She would lightly greet the fireman, looking as if she'd stepped out of a bandbox. Aunt Beth always smelt of roses, and Sam loved the way she smelt. She wore the fragrance Paris by Yves Saint Laurent. Ostensibly, Sam would always know his aunt was around when he smelt roses. In truth, he thought she owned the scent, as if it was her signature, but it did suit her, as Aunt Beth was described by many as the quintessential English rose. Sam's mother Julia was the antithesis to her sister in every regard. Sam's mother had grown up to be a tomboy who had loved climbing trees and roughing it, and all these years later, unlike her sister Beth, she was quite happy to wear sweatshirts and jeans every single day of the week without exception, and never took much pleasure in dressing up for a special occasion. She never went to the hairdresser, but cut her hair herself, and although Julie looked good, she made no effort with her appearance, and had never worn perfume a day in her life, and probably didn't want to anyway. Sam noticed that while he'd been on babysitting duty on this lonely Saturday evening, where the house had seemed almost airily quiet, something had jolted him out of his sleep and disturbed him, but what it was he didn't know. He was sure he'd heard a strange thumping noise, but wondered if he'd imagined it all, or whether the intrusive noise had all been part of his dream. He glanced down at the luxurious sweep of red woolen carpet beneath his feet, where the dog-eared book he'd been reading had slipped out of his hands and landed on the thick velvety red pile, like a dead bird with wings outstretched, almost as if the position of the book was prognostic, warning of an ominous omen of things to come that night, that nothing would prepare him for, had he been aware of what was about to happen. Even though Sam was not an avid or voracious reader like his Uncle Dylan so obviously was, he was naturally fascinated by the ornate library in his aunt's home, with its stunning walnut bookshelves that magnanimously lined the walls of the room, and some of them reached the ceiling and could only be accessed by a beautifully carved wooden ladder. There was a vast collection of books hidden behind a glass cabinet that was always locked. Some of them were so new that they'd never actually been opened, and were only handled wearing gloves to preserve the quality of these old, highly revered, treasured masterpieces of literature. Sam was always warned never to touch the locked glass cabinet. Uncle Dylan told him, "These books are highly collectible, Sam, worth an absolute fortune. They are a book collector's dream, and there's some unscrupulous book collectors out there that would love to get their hands on some of these masterpieces." While Sam fully appreciated that Uncle Dylan's collection of books was nothing short of impressive, he couldn't fully understand why some of them were worth so much money, and why his uncle seemed to take great pride in these treasures, collecting them like some people collect art or gold bullion. This stunning library, with its cosy seating arrangements of leather couches, a cherry wood coffee table, and a wonderful ornate marble fireplace, where fires would crackle merrily away on a cold winter's night. The library's favourite boast, of course, was the never-ending vast volumes of books, many covered in leather, and looked like they were worth a pretty penny. The print in some of the books was so spectacular, and was like nothing Sam had ever seen before. The truth was, Sam knew little to nothing about books, and although he naturally admired his Uncle Dylan's vast collection, he could not comprehend why his uncle was so fixated with all things literary. Sam loved relaxing in the library. It was situated adjacent to the staircase in the hallway, and was not too far away from little Billy's bedroom upstairs. So it was Aunt Beth that decided that he should remain in the library while he was on babysitting duty, so that should Billy call out to him, he would hear his cousin. It seemed like a good place for him to hang out on this evening. Earlier on in the evening, Sam had spotted something rather peculiar sticking out between two very elegant books in one of the bookshelves that looked like it shouldn't be there. He had wondered what the obstruction was, for whatever it was, it looked out of place. Sam gingerly pulled the thing out, only to discover that the item that he was now studying in his hands was a rather threadbare, bedraggled and beaten-down old book that looked like it was falling apart at the seams, as if the old glue that held the book together was now badly fractured. More out of curiosity than anything else, he had opened the weather-beaten old book to read the inside cover. There was child's handwriting on the inside that read,
"This book belongs to Elisa Hemingway." Next to her name was the date, June the 1st, 1982. Sam had no idea who this mystery girl was, for there was no one in his family with the name Elisa. But she had clearly underlined her favourite parts in the book in a bright red fountain pen that was beginning to fade. The book was written by Enid Blyton. He'd heard about Enid Blyton growing up, so out of curiosity he had taken the book along to the leather couch and settled down to read it. What was it his father had told him once about Enid Blyton? "In my day, Enid Blyton was all the rage. In my opinion, Harry Potter doesn't hold a candle to her. Enid Blyton wrote incredible mystery stories about 5 young kids with smugglers and underground hidden tunnels, stuff like that. Her work was masterful. So much better than magic spells and broomsticks as far as I'm concerned," his father had said. Sam had thought that after reading 2 pages just for the hell of it, to keep himself busily entertained, as there wasn't really much to do. So why not? He thought he'd soon grow bored. The truth was Sam had not been able to put the Enid Blyton book down, which was something he would never ever admit to any of his friends. It would absolutely ruin his street cred. He found himself getting entangled and caught up in a mystery story that had beguiled children from the 70s and 80s. But now it had drawn him right in, hook, line and sinker, as it had done to earlier generations of children. Sam could see what his father was getting at, for Enid Blyton's books were like thrillers for children. And in his humble opinion, yes, they were better than broomsticks and magic spells, even though they were written in another time, to another audience. Yet they still seemed to reach out to Sam's generation in a magical way, which meant they were classics. Sam had never been a big reader. Concentrating was always difficult for him. So a tiredness had begun to seep in, and he had drifted off to sleep. How on earth had he allowed that to happen? Why couldn't he even get this right? Was it so dreadfully hard to just stay awake for a few hours for his Aunt Beth's sake? Sam had faithfully promised his Aunt Beth that he'd keep his eyes pinned on his cousin Billy, and he had intended to keep his word by checking on his cousin every 20 minutes or so. But after he had closed his eyes for just a moment, he had fallen fast asleep, despite having drunk 3 cups of coffee that evening to stay awake. But he'd failed to realise the coffee in question that he'd been drinking was all decaffeinated. It would seem Aunt Beth was very particular about the food she drank and ate, which was one of the distinct advantages of having money. The family always brought organic vegetables and grass-fed meat, which might have been one of the reasons Aunt Beth didn't look a day over 30, when she was already 42 years old. It would seem his mother had not managed to look as young as her sister. Sam's mum had a much harder life than Aunt Beth clearly did, and it showed vividly on her face, that was rather unfortunately mapped out, with the faint beginnings of fine lines, that each year were steadily growing deeper and deeper, and more pronounced. In Sam's private opinion, both his mother Julia and Aunt Beth were decidedly ancient, but he'd never tell them that, of course. It was rude to tell adults that you thought they were pretty decrepit. The idea of being 40 absolutely horrified Sam. He couldn't envisage what it would be like to be that old. But like any teenager, he foolishly believed 40 years old was a long way off in the distant future, a whole galaxy away. He had little comprehension of how fast time actually flies. His mother had told him often enough to enjoy being 16, because it wouldn't last for very long, and before he knew it, he'd be married with a wife and kids, wondering where all the time had gone to. Sam's mother Julia had persuaded his Aunt Beth that Sam was up to doing the job of being an excellent babysitter for his cousin Billy. "Sam has grown up to be such a reliable young man," she assured her sister Beth. "Let him stay over at your place, Beth, on Saturday night, and babysit little Billy for you. I assure you, you're not going to be remotely disappointed. Your little boy could not be in safer hands. You can trust my Sam with your life." "But it's a big responsibility, surely, for a 16-year-old to watch over his cousin," Aunt Beth had said rather scathingly. "It's generous, of course, for you to offer, Julia, and I do appreciate it, but it's probably not a great idea. Besides, it's a 9-hour trip from Detroit, and I can't expect you to travel so far. I think it's best I remain at home. Dylan can go to the party on his own without me. I know it's not what he wants. He wants me to be there to support him during his speech, which he's very nervous about delivering. But it just can't be helped. As a mother, I have other responsibilities, not just to my husband, but to my son as well. I need to make sacrifices, and one of them is taking care of little Billy. I don't have an alarm installed at my home yet, and your son will be at home alone with little Billy, and I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me. Don't be ridiculous, Sam's mother had chortled. My son is 16 years old. He's practically an adult, and he's extremely responsible. You need to go to that party, sis, not only to support Dylan, but also because it's good for you to get out and socialise for a change. My guess is you've not been out since Billy was born. Am I right, or am I right? Well, I guess I haven't socialised for 3 years or so, after Billy nearly drowned in the pond. I could have lost him, sis, and I've never been able to forgive myself for that. That incident made me become extremely guarded. And that's understandable, sis. I get it, I really do. But every mother needs a break watching over her child. And you're no exception to that rule, you know. It'd actually do you the world of good to have a break. Sam is a capable young man. Very capable indeed. He's mature for his age. He's got an old head on young shoulders, let me tell you. Billy will be very safe in his charge. I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't trust my son 100%. Believe me, after he's watched over Billy for you, you'll be asking him to do it for you again and again. He won't let you down, sis. I can promise you of that. You really think I can trust a 16-year-old to watch over my son? Aunt Beth had asked her sister. I'm not terribly sure about this. Look at it this way, sis. Who would you rather trust? Sam's mother had said. Some random babysitter that you know absolutely nothing about at all. Or my son Sam, who loves the bones of his little cousin. My son will be much more concerned about Billy's welfare than himself, I can assure you of that. He'll keep a steadfast eye on his little nephew all night while you're out having a great time at that party. You deserve to have some fun, sis, for once in your life. And to let your guard down, for goodness sake. Think about it, the party is only 2 hours away from your home. It's very convenient. So if you're worried about anything, you can always come back home relatively quickly. Thank your lucky stars that the party isn't being held in Detroit, for it would be a 9-hour drive if that were the case. Then you'd probably not go anyway if I know you. I mean, think about it. You're not going to be desperately far from home, are you? No, I suppose you're absolutely right, Julie. You do raise some very significant points. I mean, the party is going to be located not too far away from where we live. So maybe I should go after all. I know Dylan will be absolutely delighted if I accompany him to the party, so I can cheer him along with that speech of his, that he's absolutely dreading, I might add. But of course you should go, sis. Sam had privately wondered how his mother could have so much indomitable faith in him. He did well enough at school, got reasonably good grades, but his mother emphatically believed that Sam was emotionally intelligent, savvy, and astute. She'd often say this, "Do you know what, Sam? You can be intelligent, intellectually bright, but emotionally very stupid. I've seen it enough, I can assure you," she had said proudly. "But you, Sam, you have your wits about you. You always look at the big picture. You're a very discerning young man." Sam had agreed to babysit his nephew, while his aunt and uncle had gone off to a big 40th birthday bash at a rather rustic outdoor venue for his uncle's closest friend, who was turning 40 years old. He had been practicing his speech doggedly for weeks on end and studying a book which gave you step-by-step instructions about how to give a very good speech that leaves behind a lasting impression on all the guests in attendance. It was necessary to employ humour to keep people thoroughly engaged. The book also advised the speech to be short and memorable.
rather than long and tediously boring. Most of the guests would be staying overnight in their own sweet little chalets, all paid for very generously by the host. But staying in the chalets was not something the Wilinskis intended to do. They would enjoy the party and some dancing later on in the evening, and then they would return home. Dylan Wilinski had grown up with his best friend Garth, and had known him since he was 4 years old. He hadn't been looking forward to doing this speech in front of over 100 guests, but he would have done anything for his best friend, who had also delivered a stunning speech for his own 40th birthday a year earlier, so he knew he needed to reciprocate that kind gesture, even if it almost killed him to do so. There was going to be a barbecue, fireworks, and plenty of dancing at the party. The Wilinskis had assured Sam that they would be back home by 2:30 at the latest the following morning, which would be a Sunday, taking into account, of course, the 2-hour drive that they would need to take from their home in Ontonagon County that was in close proximity to the Porcupine Wilderness State Park in Michigan. Sam knew how particular his aunt, Mrs. Beth Wilinski, was about her beloved Billy, and tried to offer her as much reassurance as he possibly could, insisting that Billy would be fine in his safe hands. No, he wouldn't forget Billy's meal at 5 o'clock on the dot, as Aunt Beth believed her child's routines were very important and should remain structured. Yes, he did know how to put the dinosaur-shaped organic chicken nuggets under the grill. And no, he wouldn't give Billy any Tom and Jerry's cookie dough ice cream unless he ate all his dinner first. Yes, he did know how to steam broccoli, and yes, he would make Billy eat at least 2 florets, as they are good for you. Yes, he would read him a bedtime story. Yes, he would check on him every 20 minutes or so, just to ensure that his cousin was all right. And no, he wouldn't go to bed at all until the Wilinskis came back in the early hours of the morning. Yes, he would stay up all night and wait for their return. And no, it was not a big deal. Goodness gracious me, Sam thought privately to himself. Aunt Beth really was overwrought about little Billy, and needed to be persuaded over 100 times, over and over again, before she was finally satisfied that Sam would indeed keep his word and dutifully watch over his cousin. "You're a good boy, Sam, you really are," she had said, as she was about to leave for the party. She ran a hand under his chin and looked gratefully into his eyes. "I really appreciate what you're doing for me, Sam. You have no idea what this means to me. You're taking good care of your cousin like this, I mean." "But I told you, it's no problem, Aunt Beth. I'm quite happy to look after him." The couple had left the house at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Aunt Beth had looked absolutely stunning. Sam always thought his aunt looked rather ravishing, but this evening she was exceptional. She could have been on the cover of a magazine, he thought, and even told her as much. "Aunt Beth, you look amazing!" Aunt Beth looked delighted. She always appreciated a compliment, but this was one very well deserved, as Sam was not the kind of teenager that said things at random that he didn't mean. "I mean it, you really look amazing, Aunt Beth. I like your dress you're wearing. It glitters, and the red colour, well, it's striking. I hope you don't overshadow Garth's wife at the party." "Well, I'm glad you like it," said Aunt Beth, doing a little twirl for her nephew, and unable to hide the satisfied look on her face. "My mother would never wear anything like that, Aunt Beth," said Sam, sounding disappointed. "I don't think my mother even owns a dress." "That's because you know what your mother's like. She never liked dressing up very much," said Aunt Beth. "But Julie's a very beautiful woman, you know, inside and out, and I hope you realise that, Sam. I hope you appreciate what a wonderful mother you have. You don't have to dress up into stunning clothes to be beautiful, you know. Beauty comes from within." Sam didn't say anything, but he privately thought that Aunt Beth looked like a Rolls-Royce, while his mother Julie looked like a knackered, worn-out Ford Escort that could do with another coat of paint and a trip to the panel beater to knock out some of the bumps in the scaffolding. But the less he said about that, the better. That evening Sam was reasonably proud of himself. He had managed to grill the chicken nuggets under an open grill without even burning them, which would have certainly impressed his mother. Maybe there was a cook buried inside him after all. Jamie Oliver, eat your heart out, he thought. Furthermore, Sam had artfully persuaded his cousin Billy to eat the broccoli he had steamed for him, which in itself was a laborious undertaking, as Billy detested eating his greens.
But I don't want to eat the broccoli. I hate broccoli. It's so slimy. I don't want to eat it.
But you have to eat it. I promised your mother that if you didn't eat your broccoli, that you wouldn't get any cookie dough ice cream. And I can't break my promise to her. Billy popped the broccoli florets in his mouth and moments later said, "Look,
I've eaten all my broccoli."
He stuck his tongue out.
"Now can I have some ice cream, please?"
"I'm proud of you, Billy. Well done. Of course you can have some ice cream. You've eaten your greens, haven't you?" Sam was impressed that his cousin Billy had eaten the 2 broccoli florets, so he dished him up a generous bowl of Tom and Jerry's cookie dough ice cream. When his cousin had polished the ice cream off, he cheekily pulled out the broccoli florets from the sides of his cheeks that he had stored away like a chipmunk. He dropped them onto the kitchen table triumphantly and said,
"Thank you, Sam, for the dessert. You can have the broccoli back. I hate it. It's so slimy."
"You cheeky little devil," said Sam. "I can't believe you did that, Billy." He looked in stunned surprise at the 2 wilted broccoli florets lying haphazardly across the kitchen table, that looked like they'd taken quite a bad beating in Billy's little mouth. The naughty kid looked as proud as Punch for his clever duplicity. His bright blue eyes gleamed with mischief. Sam sighed. "You're naughty, very naughty. You know, Billy, you were supposed to eat that broccoli. You tricked me. If your mum knew about this, she wouldn't be best pleased."
"Well, it's called being clever, isn't it?" said Billy proudly. "I'm never ever going to eat my slimy broccoli, never ever. But don't tell Mum my trick, because she'll never forgive me if she knows what I do."
"Don't worry, Billy. You're a cheeky little thing, and you've got quite the nerve on you. I'll give you that. But your secret's safe with me. I'd never dream of telling your mother what you just did. She'd probably die on the spot. So I never saw the broccoli you regurgitated." He winked at his cousin. "I don't actually blame you for spitting it out. I'll let you into a big secret. I also hate broccoli."
"You do?"
asked Billy. "Hate it," said Sam. "But don't tell your aunt that."
"My mother's so horrible," said Billy. "She always makes me eat my greens. The very worst is spinach. I hate spinach. It's not so easy to store in my cheeks, you know."
Sam was surprised at how ingeniously bright his little cousin Billy was for a 7-year-old boy. That evening, Billy had carefully selected the story he wanted Sam to read for him that night, while he sat up in bed wearing a pair of Mickey Mouse pajamas and hanging on to Sam's every single word, his eyes widening in excitement when the story became more interesting. Sam was reading a story to little Billy about a lion called Simba, who had a roar on him that was so ear-piercingly loud that he terrified all the animals, and he wondered why he had no friends. He had no idea that his roar incapacitated not only his enemies, but his friends as well. The story amused Billy and had made him chuckle.
"That's a funny story. I can also roar like Simba could. I can scare my friends and my enemies away," said Sam. "Look, I'll roar like Sheba for you."
He opened his mouth and began to roar, and Sam burst out laughing, because Cousin Billy sounded absolutely ridiculous.
"That's not how a lion roars," said Sam, laughing. "You sound like a laughing hyena. Look, I'll show you what a lion sounds like."
He began to scroll through his cell phone, and then he found a series of recordings on a lion's roar, which he played for little Billy, who sat upright in his bed with wide eyes as large as saucers, listening to the recording with an expression of wondrous awe on his cute little face.
"Is that what a lion really sounds like?"
he whispered. "It sure is," said Sam. The recording was exceptionally good. The sounds of the lion's roars were very intimidating. It almost felt as if a lion was hiding under Billy's bed and was about to pop out from his hiding place and tear the 2 of them apart.
"That is the scariest sound I've ever heard," said little Billy. "It sounds like the lion is in the room with us, don't you think?" "It does. But the good news, Billy, is that the lion is not here in the room with us, is he? He's in the wilderness far away, probably somewhere in Africa for all we know. This is just a tape recording, so it can't hurt you," said Sam, pressing download on his cell phone, deciding that the lion's roars were so spectacular they needed recording and were well worth saving. "I feel very, very sorry for poor Simba. He must have been such a lonely lion, especially if he had such a dangerous roar like that, because nobody wanted to be his friend, did they? Because everybody was scared of him." Sam waited at the end of Billy's bed for his cousin to finally fall asleep, and he didn't have to wait for long. Then he trailed downstairs to make himself comfortable on his uncle's couch in the library, all the while chuckling to himself at about how terribly affrighted poor little Billy had been when he'd listened to the lion's roars. Sam sat up on the couch, shocked by how long he'd been fast asleep for, cursing himself for his apathetic insouciance, and that was when he heard the strange thumping noise again, followed by the sound of broken glass. It was coming from the kitchen. For a second Sam froze. His knees began to tremble. He rose up quickly to a standing position from the couch, standing rigidly still, every muscle in his body tightening and stiffening, while the colour drained away from his face. He could feel his heartbeat increase in intensity, like a wild animal, sensing the very presence of danger. Someone was in the house. Oh my God, someone was in the house. This just could not be happening. Not now, not tonight, not while he was on babysitting duty. Sam began to panic. Little Billy was upstairs, lying fast asleep in bed. Sam had negligently failed in his duties tonight, and had failed to check in on his cousin. Sam quickly grabbed the cast-iron fire poker by the fireplace, for it was the only weapon he could find to hand. He clandestinely crept behind the library door, to listen carefully to the muffled noises going on in the Valinsky's house. Whoever had broken in was trying their level best to be quiet, but not exactly succeeding in their endeavours. The thumps he was hearing could have easily awoken the living dead. These intruders clearly believed that no one was at home. The library door was very solidly built. It had been purchased in Morocco by the Valinskys, was magnificently carved. The heavy door always remained open, so it was an excellent hiding place, and you could hide there without being seen. But Sam didn't feel confident or safe in the Valinskys' house right now. Every part of him was screaming to get the hell out of the place. But then there was little Billy's safety to consider, and he couldn't just abandon his little cousin, although the temptation to climb out of the library window and bolt out of the house was foremost in his mind. He could hear the padding of footsteps on the floor of the kitchen. Whoever had entered the house was definitely still in the kitchen. He drew in a sharp breath when he heard two distinctive male voices. A chill crept down his spine. Oh my God, there were two of them. This was a worse-case scenario than he could have ever envisaged. What chance did he have against two men? Little did Sam realize that little Billy, who he assumed was sleeping obliviously upstairs, had actually heard the furtive intruders breaking into the house. The young boy had awoken with quite the start, for he'd heard movement around the house, and pebbles being crushed outside of the window. It had scared the bejesus out of the little boy. In his fear, little Billy had stood up in his bed, leaning out of the window to observe what was going on. He instinctively knew that someone was out there. He let out a tiny little gasp when he'd seen two figures skulking outside the house, pressing their faces against the windows as if to look inside the property to ensure no one was there. These were bad, bad men that wanted to get into the family home. Little Billy at 7 nervously called out to his cousin, "Sam! Sam! I'm scared! Someone's trying to get into the house!" But as he cried, there was no response from his cousin, who should have heard him from the library that was adjacent to the stairs. Little Billy did not know what to do. If the two men got into the house, they might hurt him. They might hurt Sam. His mother had warned him never to trust strangers. If someone tried to talk to him, he should always run away and hide. Strangers could not always be trusted. His mother had drilled this into his young mind often enough, as so terrified was Aunt Beth about anyone potentially trying to abduct her son. "What do you do, Billy, if a strange man approaches you and asks you to go back to his car to see the kittens he's got there? Or he tries to give you some candies? What do you do then?" "Well, I don't trust him. I don't go to his car to see the kittens, and I don't accept any candy from him. I run away as fast as I can, and I look for a cop, someone wearing a uniform that I know can help me." "Good boy. That's what you always need to do." Billy's mother had not told him what to do if there was no cop to run to for help. He thought about crawling under the bed, but then he knew if he hid under the bed, he could easily be found by those two horrible intruders that were in any moment about to break into the family home. And then he heard it from the bedroom, a banging sound, followed by the sound of broken glass. He had seen the two men squeezing through the window of the kitchen and climbing straight into the house. They were so big. Billy tried to think about the best place where he could hide. Even though his cousin Sam was big, these men were so much bigger than his cousin. There was no time to lose, Billy thought. His tiny little heart pounded violently in his chest. He had never felt so desperately afraid, apart from the time in the movie he had been watching, when a horrible man tried to catch all the dogs on the street and put them into a large crate. But one of the dogs had bit the horrible man and taken off his hand, and Billy was so happy because the dogs all managed to escape. Little Billy crept into his mother's room, and using the sliding door on the patio, he accessed the fire escape, which was a thin line of iron stairs that led from the balcony to the ground. Billy ran out into the yard, with wallops of cool breeze brushing against his skin. His first thought was to run to the woods. That would be the very best place for him to hide, but it was so dark in there, and could be very scary at this time of the night, but not as terrifying as the two men that had broken into the family home. His mother always warned him to be very careful of strangers. Billy had a favourite tree in the woods. He'd go and hide in the tree branches until his mother came home. He wished he had a cell phone on him. Some kids his age had a cell phone, but his mother had insisted having a phone at such a young age was not a good idea. But if he had a phone, he could call his mother and tell her about the horrible men that had broken into the house, that had climbed through the kitchen window. His mother would be very upset about that, because when people came to visit, they always came by the front door. If you climbed through a window in the middle of the night, it meant you were a very bad person. Billy was in no doubt about that.
"Are you sure no one is in the house, Ernie? Are you absolutely sure?" came the voice above a whisper that Sam had heard all too clearly. "These people are rich. They could have a firearm. If someone was around, we'd be bloody defenceless. I don't fancy being locked up for years and years over a damn book. For God's sake, Trout, get a grip. Are you a man or a mouse? I told you the people are not here tonight. I've done my research. I'm not exactly throwing you into the lion's den, am I? I know what I'm bloody doing. Otherwise we wouldn't be here, would we? Look at the sink over there, bro. There's some dirty dishes soaking in the sink. 2 to be precise. They look relatively fresh. It means someone might be in this house. I'm telling you, someone could be in this house. What about the dirty dishes? Are you really that dumb, Trout? Maybe the couple ate over those plates and left in a tearing rush. They didn't have time to wash their dishes, did they? That often happens. How often do we leave the dishes piling up in the sink before one of us gets round to washing them? I told you, they've gone to a 40th birthday bash. No one is at home. We've got the place to ourselves. Then why do I get this feeling that someone is in the house? I don't feel good about this. I've spent a stint in prison, and I'm not going back over a bloody book. Not for you. Not for anyone. Keep your hair on, Trout, even though you haven't got any. You're a prize ass, you really are. I told you, no one's bloody here. The owners have gone out. The house is empty. So stop bloody whinging, will you? And get a move on. We need to find that library fast. We're looking for a Pacific book for Marcus. You've got the name on a piece of paper in your pocket, so get it ready for me.
I think we should take some more books from the owner's collection for ourselves while we're at it. We can sell them ourselves for big bucks. I'm sure they must all be valuable. The owner of this property is a book collector, and by the looks of things he's got a hell of a lot of money. Look around you at all this stuff. These people are absolutely minted. We're going to be paid big bucks from Marcus, and we can get extra money for stealing some other books that look valuable to us. So I don't need you losing it, bro. Now we need to find that library and a locked glass cabinet. That should be easy enough to locate. How much is this book worth, Ernie? I never knew books could be valuable. I just don't get it. It's worth a bloody fortune. That's what. Marcus told me about it. Now let's find the library, shall we? We can't dawdle, so get a bloody move on. Even a sloth would be faster than you. Why I brought you to help me on this mission, God only knows. You're such a bumbling idiot, Trout. I can't believe you knocked over that glass vase. Only you could do that. You're lucky no one's in the house tonight, or we'd already have been arrested by the police. You're like a bloody elephant in a china shop. I forgot how ungainly you are.
Sam stiffened as he listened to the two whispering voices. His heart began to pound violently in his chest, and the sounds of boots padded across the floor. Oh my goodness, they were coming his way, getting closer and closer and closer, too close for comfort. There was no time to do anything. He'd have to remain discreetly hidden behind the door. He couldn't find an alternative hiding place. If the truth be told, hiding behind the heavy carved door might be the very best place to hide after all. He wondered if he should call 911 to inform the emergency services that there was an intruder in the house. This is what his aunt would have expected him to do. But if he did so, he might draw attention to himself from these men, putting himself in harm's way. It was better to remain still and hope for the best. Let these robbers take what they needed to take, and when they vacated the property with their ill-gotten gains, he would finally call the police. Sam felt terribly afraid, for he'd never been thrown in a precarious situation like this before. You heard stories, didn't you, about burglaries that had turned violent, where people had often been killed or shot dead at the scene of the crime. But he overheard that the men were not carrying a firearm, but there were other ways to skin a cat, were there not? And for all he knew, the men could be concealing some kind of weapon. With one hand he fiddled awkwardly with the cell phone in his pocket, as if in some way the cell phone offered him a lifeline of security. Because, if need be, he could press the button and hope that the police would come as soon as possible. A little voice in his head warned him to leave the cell phone well alone and remain discreetly hidden behind the door. "Remember," the voice encouraged, "when the men have got what they want, they will go, and you and Billy will be fine. These men probably don't even want any violence. They just want one of Uncle Dylan's valuable books." The truth was, nothing had prepared Sam for a break-in like this. In his other hand, that was profusely sweating, he was still tightly grasping the fire-poker. He hoped he wouldn't have to fling it at the intruder, but if the worst came to the worst, that is exactly what he would do. He didn't fancy himself coming up against the might of two powerfully strong men, who could easily overpower him if push came to shove. By the sounds of things, the two men intrinsically believed that no one was in the house. That had to be a good thing. They were clearly interested in one of Uncle Dylan's books that was worth a pretty penny. It was unlikely they would even disturb Billy, who was innocently sleeping upstairs, tucked away in his bed, totally clueless as to what was going on. And Sam could only hope that little Billy would stay that way. He knew his little cousin would be terrified if he were to know that two men had broken into the family home. Sam deduced that these well-informed men appeared to know a great deal about the Valinskis and his uncle's prize book collection, yet they seemed blindly oblivious that his aunt and uncle had a child who might just be at home under the charge of a babysitter. Had they really not thought about that? These people had clearly not done all their homework as concisely as they thought they had, which was a good thing, as it gave Sam a fighting chance of not being discovered. Sam held his breath. His heart palpitated in his chest, the beats beginning to thunder in his ears, drowning out the raised whispers of the two men. Sam's breathing slowed down
as the two men entered the library. They were so close he could have literally reached out and touched one of these perpetrators had he so wished to, which was an unnerving, rather disquieting thought. Surely these men would feel his presence. Did they not say when someone was watching you that people could sense they were being watched? It would seem that even though Trout had spent a stint in prison and was clearly being derided and bullied by this man called Ernie, who was a bit of a bull terrier, he probably was the sharper of the two men, because he had initially pointed out that he was certain someone was at home. Sam could only hope with all his heart that his little cousin Billy would stay obliviously fast asleep in his bed upstairs, and not be rudely awakened by these intruders. The thought of his little cousin trotting innocently down the staircase, wearing his sweet Mickey Mouse pyjamas, only to observe the two robbers wearing ski masks over their faces, almost made Sam squirm and have a full-blown panic attack. He knew the men's disarming appearance would terrify little Billy. As he thought about his cousin, unfortunately his Aunt Beth's face flashed into his mind, an ever-cruel reminder of how he had catastrophically failed in his babysitting duties tonight. If only he hadn't fallen fast asleep, he might have been aware of what was going on around him, and succeeded in calling the emergency services before the men broke in. Sam knew he had been too sleepy to react efficiently to what had been going on. He had faithfully promised Aunt Beth that he would stay awake all night until she finally returned home from the party. In his gut he knew he had betrayed his aunt's trust. If she were to see what was happening now in her house, she would absolutely lose it. She would be so disappointed in him. Billy was only a kid. Surely these men wouldn't hurt him, Sam reasoned with himself. They hadn't broken into the Valinsky's house to hurt a 7-year-old boy. They were obviously doing a job for a man called Marcus. Sam had gathered that much, who was keen to get his greedy, grubby hands on one of Uncle Dylan's prize books, and had got these men, both Ernie and Trout, to do his dirty work for him, and was calling all the shots, so that he could remain scrupulously clean and untarnished from this insidious crime, of which he was heavily involved. It was always the way, wasn't it? Someone with wealth and power, treacherously pulling the strings in these nefarious crime syndicates, if you could call them that, so that they could stay out of trouble. Sam reckoned that this made Marcus 1,000 times more obnoxious than both Trout and Ernie, who were being used like puppets in a children's show to do his bidding. Uncle Dylan would be absolutely mortified to lose a precious book of his, especially if it really was so valuable. But that was the least of Sam's concerns right now. While Uncle Dylan's books may be a treasured collector's dream, nothing mattered more than staying out of harm's way. He knew his Aunt Beth would agree with this. She'd want Sam, in these hair-raising circumstances, to remain discreetly hidden behind the door of the library until the perpetrators had left the premises, which is what he fully intended to do. "This is it," whispered the man, who called himself Ernie, letting out an impressed whistle. "Look at this place. How the other half live. Look at these books. There are hundreds of them. They're like works of bloody art. This stuff must be worth a bloody fortune. I feel as if we've walked into an Aladdin's cave of books. Never seen anything like it in my entire life. Have you ever seen such an impressive collection? I'm telling you, bro, these books have got to be worth a pretty penny." "I've never seen so many books in all my life," came Trout's awed reply. "They all look hell of expensive, don't they? Some of them are old, they could be antiques, but they're still in pristine, perfect condition. I've never seen such a fine collection before. If we take some of these books for ourselves, we could get rich. There are unscrupulous stealers out there just like Marcus that'll do anything to get their hands on books like these. Some of them are clearly first editions." "That's what I've been saying all along, Dopey," said Ernie. "Marcus doesn't need to know about the other books we intend to take, does he? But if we take as many as we can carry in that bag of yours, we'll be laughing all the way to the bank. You can bet me on that." "If no one is in the house, as you say, Ernie, please can I take my balaclava off? It's so stuffy wearing this thing. I feel as if I can't breathe properly. What the hell is wrong with you, Trout? Of course you can't take your balaclava off. You don't know if these bloody people, whatever you call them, the Valinskys that own this house, you don't know if they have hidden cameras in this room. They could have pictures of us on record that they might show to the police. We can't afford to be lax. I'm surprised that after you spent a stint in prison, you don't know any better. We don't want to get sloppy, do we? Sloppy people have a nasty habit of getting caught. Look over there, at that glass cabinet. Marcus was telling us to look out for that. Oh my God, can you believe it, Trout? Talk about being lackadaisical. The keys are in the cabinet door, and the couple are out. You would think with valuable books like this, they'd lock them away safely. Instead, the man of the house leaves the keys in the glass cabinet. And furthermore, the couple doesn't even bother to alarm the place. Even if they do live out in the sticks. Does the man of the house not realize that there are book collectors out there that will employ nefarious tactics and means to get some of his books? And yet he has no security whatsoever. The man's as dopey as you, Trout, and that Dalmatian of yours, Dodo. Dodo is not dopey, came Trout's defensive voice. I won't have you demean my dog like that, nor will I have you demean me. How dare you speak to me like that? Oh, I'm sorry, don't overreact. You're not dopey then, nor is your dog. But I guess the man that owns this house is. The security will likely change when Mr. Dylan Valinsky, if that is his name, discovers his priceless treasures have been stolen. I bet he'll completely lose it when he discovers his prized book is missing, said Ernie with a satisfied smirk. The man called Trout put the large duffel bag down on the library's luxurious red carpet, while Ernie turned the key in the glass cabinet that contained the very special collection of books. Sam watched the men from behind the door. He noticed that they were both wearing gloves, probably so they didn't leave behind any fingerprints, or damage some of the pristine books that had never been manhandled before a day in their lives. But by the looks of things, there was nothing remotely professional about these two ungainly, rather cack-handed men. "What's the bloody name of the book that Marcus needs us to get?" asked Ernie. "Trout, give me that piece of paper, will you, that he gave you? I need it now." Trout began fumbling around in his pocket, rather awkwardly, like a teenager desperately looking for a packet of cigarettes he was sure he had in his pocket, but now appears to have misplaced. Trout began turning out his pockets, removing sweet papers, and an old receipt that he tossed out on the red carpet indiscriminately, without a care in the world, blindly oblivious that he was leaving behind a trail of DNA evidence. "I can't find that damn piece of paper. Where is it? Marcus gave it to me, I remember he did. And I put it in my pocket. I definitely put it in my pocket," he said, sounding alarmed. "What have I done with it? I know it was here. I was sure it was in my pocket, Ernie, but I can't find it. How can this happen? I know I put it in my pocket. I know I did. What have I done with it, Ernie? You ignoramus! What the hell is wrong with you, Trout? You may have bloody gills, but you haven't got any brain in that head of yours. I need that bloody paper to find the name of the book we're looking for. How am I expected to find it if you've gone and lost the bloody thing? I can't even remember the name of the book offhand. Only you could cause such pandemonium like this in the middle of a robbery. I can't believe you, Trout. You can't be trusted with anything. I can't rely on you to do anything right, can I? Unless, of course, I do it myself. It's so typical of you to do this. I knew you would do something stupid like this. I'm now going to have to phone Marcus, aren't I? He's going to think he's hired a couple of airheads to do this job for him. He's not going to be impressed, but you leave me no choice in the matter, do you? Oh, I know where I put it, bro, said Trout, suddenly sounding proud of himself. I've just remembered. I put it inside my boot. I knew I couldn't lose it if I put it in my boot. Sometimes things fall out of my pockets, so I thought it would be a lot safer if I kept it in my boot. It's all come back to me now. You're an idiot, that's what you are. Things drop out of your pocket, Trout, because you eat so many bloody sweets and leave a trail of sweet papers around you wherever you go. Even a squirrel knows better than you do. You better pick those papers up before you leave behind any evidence. So you decided to put the note in your boot, did you? And nearly forgot where you put it? That's so typical of you. What the hell? Are you bloody mad, Trout? Talk about making life so much more complicated. You're holding us up with all these warped ideas of yours. Get a move on, will you? I need that note now, so I can find the bloody book we're looking for. If we carry on this way, the Valinskis will return home from the party and catch us in the act. The whole idea of this job is to do it quickly, discreetly, and efficiently. But you're dragging things out with your absolute incompetence. No one would ever believe you spent a stint in prison. You learnt nothing from the other prisoners there. Now give me that note, will you? I can't wait here all day. Trout began digging around in one of his boots, looking for the paper. He couldn't remember whether he'd put the note in the left or right boot. He could see Ernie was losing it. Finally he found the note and handed it to Ernie, who snatched it out of his hand abruptly. Sam listened to the strange interaction between the two butter-fingered burglars, who clearly didn't know what they were doing. There was no doubt that Trout, whoever he was, appeared to be a bit of a buffoon. Sam doubted that they'd ever broken into someone's house before. They were complete novices in that regard. He found himself fumbling around with his cell phone in his pocket. Maybe he could get these burglars' voices on tape. The police might be able to identify these men by their voices. Right now he didn't feel that threatened by the men anymore. They looked harmless enough, and were more like a couple of bumbling idiots rather than two skilled cat burglars with the potential to turn violent. Sam's anxiety had significantly subsided, although of course he didn't trust himself to pounce on these men with an iron poker. While the men might indeed be ham-fisted and lacking nimble dexterity, they were a lot stronger than he was and could easily overpower him without a shadow of doubt. These men, although lean, had bulging biceps and enough brawn between the two of them to snap open a walnut with a pinky finger. Sam didn't doubt they spent countless hours in the gym lifting weights, when it might not have done them any harm to employ a spot of bar work in a gymnasium to acquire some much-needed agility, which both men were sorely lacking, and would probably be a useful asset if you intended to make a living out of breaking into people's houses without being caught. Sam pressed the record button on his cell phone, but he had accidentally pressed downloads instead. It was too late to do anything about it now. All of a sudden the lion's roars he'd played to his cousin earlier on in the evening, before putting his cousin Billy to bed, could be heard in the library. It was an absolutely petrifying sound that made you in no uncertain doubt that a dangerous predator was in your midst, and worse still, probably only standing feet away from you and about to pounce on you. "What the hell? Did you hear that, Trout?" Ernie cried out in horror. "There's a bloody tiger in this room. I'm telling you, there's a tiger in this room, and I'm not joking either. These bloody people, the Valinskis or whatever you call them, keep a tiger as a pet. And it's guarding the owner's books, for God's sake. These rich folks are wacko, I'm telling you, Trout. Who keeps a bloody tiger as a pet? I think we've woken up a sleeping giant tonight. I'm telling you, that thing is behind the sofa over there. And it's watching us. It's watching us, Trout. I can feel it there. Do you know, I knew when we came into this library that something was watching us, and I wasn't wrong. I didn't want to say anything to you, but I could feel it. I could feel the predator. He's behind the sofa. We need to get the hell out of here." "A tiger," came Trout's trembling voice. "A tiger. You think there's a tiger in this room? It's going to kill us. It's going to kill us, isn't it?" "Of course it's going to bloody kill us, Trout. It's a tiger, for God's sake. Quit stating the blindingly obvious, will you? You can hear it's upset. Because it's got a frightful roar on it. We probably woke him up, thanks to you making such a commotion trying to get that note out of your bloody boot. We need to get the hell out of here. I'm telling you, that treacherous thing is behind the couch, and it could pounce on us any second, and God forbid what it's going to do to us." "Oh, I knew this job for Marcus was a bad idea," whimpered Trout. "I told you not to do it, didn't I, Ernie? But you wouldn't listen to me, would you? I didn't have a good feeling about this." "Quit whinging, Trout, will you? We need to get out of here as slowly as we can. Whatever you do, don't you dare panic. That will excite the tiger. Act calm. Remember, it's the owner's domesticated pet. It's probably used to people. People have even petted it, I imagine. So we might get out of here unscathed if we keep our wits about us. So don't do anything stupid to excite it, or to provoke it to anger. He's already aggrieved with us, you can hear by the sounds of the growling. We don't want to upset the creature any more. He's by nature a wild animal, and if we act scared, it will pick up on our negative energy and kill us without even squirming. It's their instinctive behavior, isn't it, to chase after anything that moves at a speed? I'm telling you, the Valinskys are absolutely insane. These people are completely nuts, bonkers over the top. To keep a wild animal like this inside a library of all things, I'm not sure it's even legal. It's like carrying a hand grenade around and expecting it not to explode.
Ernie began patiently backing out of the library, indicating with profusive, rather dramatic hand gestures and whispers for Trout to do the same, and to follow his lead. But Trout was not watching him. The terrified man could only stare at the couch, his body shaking like a leaf. Even though he was wearing a balaclava over his head, his terrified eyes seemed to grow as wide as saucers, and were very visible to Sam, who could sense the man's panic. It was as tangible as the scent of laundry detergent on a washed piece of clothing. Trout's eyes looked like a blue-grey colour, and they remained fixed on the white leather sofa, almost as if the sofa itself might in a blink of an eyelash morph into a tiger and give him chase. Sam could almost imagine Trout's skin paling behind the ski mask, as it drained of all colour. Ernie had backed out of the library as quietly, discreetly, and as methodically as he possibly could, but his whole body betrayed his obvious angst, as it swayed precariously like a tree branch in a wild windstorm. He wobbled unsteadily on his feet, as if he was struggling to stand upright, while his head remained stoically fixed on the sofa. Sam could not blame Ernie for thinking that a wild animal was in his midst, for the astonishingly good recording of the lion's roars was too close for comfort, and so real. You had to believe that the creature was in the room. It really did feel as if the tiger was lying low in the library, behind the sofa, even though the roars were made by a lion, but it was easy to believe that something very dangerous was there. Sam kept playing the lion's roars again and again, to get both the men to evacuate the house speedily. They had long since forgotten about the book they intended to steal, and the duffel bag that was lying half open on the luxurious red carpet had been ignored and abandoned. Sam grinned proudly to himself. He could see the panic in the men's frantic behaviour, and to his surprise he was rather beginning to enjoy himself. Once Ernie was in the passageway, he directed his attention to Trout. "Now listen to me, Trout. You're going to back out of this room very, very carefully. Do you understand? Try your very best not to run. I know it's tempting, but you can't afford to do it. Take it very slow, will you? Just like I did. The tiger will chase you if you move too fast, or show any sign of panic. He's already warning us with those growls. Once you've joined me here in the passageway, Trout, we will discreetly close the library door behind us to contain the tiger, so he can't pursue us. Then we will hightail it to the kitchen as fast as we can, and get the hell out of this house through the kitchen window. Get it?" Trout failed to listen to Ernie's sagacious advice. He promptly ran out of the library as fast as he possibly could, overtaking Ernie and shrieking in terror with ear-piercing shrill cries. Both men began to panic and make a hasty scramble to the kitchen, with Ernie behind Trout, telling him to shut up because the tiger was on their trail. In their blind panic, both Ernie and Trout had failed to close the library door behind them, which might have been a good idea if they believed the library contained a tiger. Indeed, so convinced were they that they were being pursued by a tiger, that even though nothing was chasing after them, they believed they were definitely being pursued by the creature. "It's behind us! It's behind us, Trout!" Ernie cried out. "I can hear its breathing! Oh my God! It's going to kill us, Trout! It's going to bloody kill us!" Ernie and Trout had run through the house like two jackrabbits, not daring to look back for a single instant, as if they were terribly afraid of what they might see. It was in the distance that Sam could finally hear the roar of a car engine starting up, and then everything in the house went very quiet and normality resumed, almost as if the robber's presence in Aunt Beth's home had only been a glitch in the matrix and hadn't really happened. Sam was not surprised the men panicked to hear such a formidable, terrifying roar in Uncle Dylan's library. It must have been very unnerving for them. Even hearing it again himself and knowing it was a recording had made Sam's nerves rattle. But when you didn't know it was a recording, you'd absolutely believe that a wild cat like a lion or a tiger was loitering around the library. Undoubtedly the two burglars believed that Uncle Dylan kept a wild animal in the house to guard his collection of very treasured books. Ernie had been convinced the roar came from a tiger. Sam smiled contentedly to himself because his Uncle Dylan's books remained safe, and so did Billy, sleeping upstairs, so all was well. He knew how some rich people indulged in strange idiosyncratic behaviours, so it was reasonable for Trout and Ernie to assume that his uncle kept a wild animal on the premises. Whoever Marcus was, who had orchestrated this theft, he would likely be informed by both Ernie and Trout that the owner of the house, Dylan Valinsky, had a tiger guarding the place that had come very close to tearing them apart. No, they hadn't been able to steal the valuable book. And yes, unfortunately, they had left behind their duffel bag containing some of their break-in tools, as well as a pile of sweet wrappers that had fallen on the carpet, that Trout had dropped, leaving a trail of DNA evidence behind. But none of that could be helped. Sam was quite certain that both men would highly exaggerate the danger they had been in. But one thing was for sure, they'd never come back to the Valinskys' house, so Uncle Dylan's collection of books remained safe. Sam hurriedly sashayed to the kitchen to examine the damage of the broken glass. He was expecting to find a shattered window, but the men had managed to climb through an open window without much trouble at all, as a couple of the bars in the windows had been bent backwards using a powerful tool that he was later to discover in the duffel bag that the two men had left behind in their haste. The broken glass was Aunt Beth's favourite crystal vase that had obviously been accidentally broken by one of the robbers during their maladroit, blundering attempts to get through the half-open kitchen window. The glass vase had been resting on the window pane, and no doubt Trout had knocked it over. The glass lay across the marble slab, as well as on the floor, and petals from the flowers lay scattered liberally everywhere, like bridal confetti. The men had left a dreadful smell behind them in the library that was quite repugnant. Sam realised it was the smell of terror. All of a sudden Sam thought about his cousin Billy. He'd almost forgotten about him. How relieved he was to think that Billy was tucked away safely in his bed upstairs, and had no idea that two intruders had broken into their house during the night, who would definitely not be coming back, if they believed a wild tiger was loitering around the house. No one in their right mind would do that, unless they had a death wish of some sort. Sam ruminated over everything, and decided he would not tell Aunt Beth what had happened tonight. What would be the point in that? He knew that if she had even a smidgen of an inkling that two intruders had been ferreting around her house while her boy Billy was fast asleep upstairs, that Aunt Beth would never forgive herself for going out that night to the party. Sam knew his aunt's pedantic, overly protective behaviour towards Billy would ultimately get worse and worse, and the poor boy would grow up being completely suffocated and smothered by his well-meaning mother. No, he couldn't let his cousin be subject to all that. Helicopter parents were the very worst. He decided he would tell Aunt Beth he had accidentally broken her crystal vase by mistake and was dreadfully sorry. He would also offer to pay for the damages. The less Aunt Beth knew about the break-in, the better. As for the bent bars in the window, he'd managed to use a wrench to help pull them back in a position, but they were falling apart. He doubted his aunt would notice them for a long while, for she left the window half open most of the time. Sam decided he would brush the events of this inauspicious night under the carpet, as if it hadn't happened at all. "I better check on little Billy," he thought, climbing up the staircase quietly and taking a peek into Billy's bedroom. He froze in the doorway when he realised that Billy's bed was empty. Perhaps Billy had gone to the toilet, or maybe he'd heard the robbers and had hidden in the closet or under the bed, as kids that age would be inclined to do that when they were terribly afraid. Of course, that made perfect sense. Ernie and Trout had made quite the commotion breaking into the house that night,
was it any surprise that Billy had been awoken by them? "Billy!" Sam called out. "Billy! Where are you, Billy? It's safe now. The bad men have gone. They aren't coming back." But Billy did not respond. Sam began to frantically search for his little cousin, and panic seized him when Billy was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had mysteriously disappeared off the face of the earth. Where the hell was he? In his desperate haste, Sam began to hurriedly open closets, look frantically under beds, and through every single nook and cranny in the entire house. He was half expecting to see a frightened boy staring up at him with wide, innocent blue eyes, wearing a cute pair of Mickey Mouse pajamas, and asking Sam if the two horrible men had gone. But Sam could not find Billy anywhere. He soon realized, after seeing the sliding door in his aunt's bedroom was ajar, which led onto the balcony, where in the far corner there was a discreet fire escape tucked away very inconspicuously, with narrow winding iron sets of stairs that led down to the backyard. That was it, Sam thought. Billy must have used the fire escape to abandon the house. Sam knew his Aunt Beth would not have left the door in her bedroom ajar, as she was always particular about keeping doors locked. In a trice Sam came to the swift conclusion that little Billy had slipped out of the house by way of the fire escape. That had to be it. He must have run off to hide somewhere in the woods, which was a brave, rather noble thing for a 7-year-old boy to do, given he was sure that if Billy had been anything like him at the same age, that his little cousin was more than a little terrified of the dark. Sam suspected his little cousin must have heard the burglars entering the house, and been so desperately afraid that he had overcome his fear of the dark and slipped out in the darkness to evade the men. Maybe he thought the strange men would harm him, probably because Aunt Beth was tirelessly warning the little 7-year-old not to ever trust strangers. There were bad men in the world that couldn't be trusted, that wanted to hurt little children like Billy, while offering them lollipops and sweets and pretending to be nice. Aunt Beth had wanted to be sure that little Billy had his wits about him at all times. "I've got to find Billy," thought Sam. He knew if Aunt Beth had any clue about what was transpiring right now, she'd probably be rushed to the ER after suffering from a major heart attack. Aunt Beth was so highly strung, so overly protective over little Billy. So if she knew Billy was missing, she'd literally fall apart like a bag of wheat that breaks open, spilling out all its grain over the threshold of the barn floor, and leaving behind a sizable mess that was by no means easy to sweep up. Sam needed to find Billy before his aunt and uncle returned to the house at 2:30 in the morning, when they were scheduled to arrive home from the party. Sam still had time on his side. He knew he needed to find Billy, and find him as fast as he possibly could. Sam hurriedly rifled through the closet in the entrance hall, and on a shelf he found exactly what he was looking for, a large torch. There was one you could carry in your hand, and one you could wear on your head. He'd use both forms of lighting, as he needed all the help he could get in locating little Billy, as quickly as he could. His cousin could be hiding anywhere. The last thing he wanted to do was to circumnavigate the woods in the middle of the night, searching for his cousin in a tenebrific maze of trees. But he didn't have much choice in the matter, so he needed to find his little cousin as soon as he possibly could, and time was of the essence. As Sam slipped out cautiously into the night, shivering more from nervous trepidation than cold, he made his way to the woods, leaving his reluctance far behind him. The cool night was fragrantly anointed by gasps of fresh cold air that brushed unabashedly against his cheeks, as if blowing sweet kisses on his face. The dark sky was illuminated by a half-moon. It was the rich colour of a velvety black evening gown that was magnanimously studded with a glamorous diamante bling. It was rather unfortunate that the moonlight this evening was pitifully miserly in her generosity, for the light she cast out was exceedingly subdued. Dense dark shadows framed the crooked footpaths that in Sam's opinion looked rather like cardboard cutouts, from the tall lofty silhouettes of the trees to the lumpy well-rounded shapes of shrubs and bushes that made Sam's journey through the trees become infinitely more menacing and unfriendly at this late hour. Everything was ambiguously unexpressive and indistinctly vague. Luckily Sam's torchlight cast away the ominously dark shadows, as if dusting away stray cobwebs from the corner of the ceiling. He was exceedingly grateful that he could pretty much see where he was going, so his search for Sam was not as intimidating as he first envisaged it would be. Uncle Dylan's torches were remarkably bright, so it made his insufferable challenging mission to find little Billy a whole lot more bearable. If the truth be told, Sam had always been desperately afraid of the dark, but this was something he was not prepared to admit to any of his friends. It would make him a wuss, and reputation was everything when you were 16 years old. For God's sake, he told himself, keep it together, Sam. If you fall apart like Aunt Beth would do, you'll never find your cousin. He knew from his father that if you were caught up in a tumultuous situation, you needed to focus on what you were doing, and not allow your mind to stray or entertain itself with disquieting thoughts. Panic can kill you, son, his father had told him once. So navigating himself rather awkwardly down the precarious, erratic, rocky paths, bespeckled with a tangle of rigorously wild foliage and thick, gnarly roots that clawed their way through the earth in a series of inappropriate, squiggly shapes that rather resembled a road map, was by no means easy. One of those roots would throw him on his feet, so he needed to pay attention to where he was going, or he'd end up in trouble. He could hear the sounds of crickets and frogs sending out their musical trills, but they stopped their chorus when Sam began to call out for his cousin. His voice travelled through the woods, returning to him with an echo. "Billy! Billy, where are you? It's me, it's Sammy. Everything's all right. Those horrible men have gone. I promise you they've gone." Sammy threw his torchlight over the lumpy dark obstacles in his way, while his sneakers pounded the twigs and fallen leaves beneath his feet that made a popping noise. For a brief second, Sam stopped dead in his tracks. He glanced nervously over his shoulders, flashing his torchlight over every indistinct nook and cranny in the grove. Someone was there. He knew it with every single fibre of his being. And whoever it was, they were clandestinely watching him. He knew it. He could feel eyes burning into him. He began to flash his light nervously all over the woods, trying to smoke out anything that might be clandestinely hiding in plain sight. "Hello! Hello, is anybody there?" he called out in a trembling voice. "Is anybody there?" He was met with a stern, disquieting silence that did not ease the pounding heartbeats that began to drum-roll in his chest so wildly, rather like a herd of bison galloping across a vast wilderness at a mighty, mighty speed. "Don't be ridiculous," Sam told himself very sternly. "You're imagining things are there, when they're not actually there. No one is watching you. Now, for goodness sake, Sam, do what you came here to do. Concentrate on finding your cousin, and don't lose your bottle." The self-talk that Sam often engaged in when he lacked confidence encouraged him to call out again, although this time his voice sounded a little shrill. "Billy!" he called out, his voice shaking like a baby's rattle. "It's me, Sam! It's safe to come out now. It really is. Those bad men are gone. I promise you they're gone." His calls were still met by a paradoxical silence that seemed both unnatural, inauspicious, and outer-worldly. The ill-omened feeling of being watched just would not go away. It was relentless. It seemed to cling to him like a thorny briar that refused to evacuate itself from his clothing. Sam knew something or someone was watching him. There was no doubt about it in his mind. He had such a profound certainty about it. It was a feeling that pulverized all his confidence. The woods seemed to become bodefully menacing, especially after he heard an owl hoot, then a flapping of gigantic wings, and the eerie sound of someone's feet crushing the forest foliage, as if they were stalking him very discreetly. The ominous haunting sounds that Sam was hearing had made him practically jump out of his skin. He was desirous to get the hell out of these woods as fast as he possibly could, rather like a frightened rabbit scurrying right back to the safety of its burrow. But Sam was cruelly reminded that finding little Billy was of pivotal importance. He couldn't think about his own feelings now. He had a duty of responsibility and care for little Billy, who his Aunt Beth had faithfully put under his charge. Tonight he had failed his cousin in his babysitting duties so very badly that little Billy had run away. No doubt his little cousin had been absolutely terrified. Traumatic visions teased his mind, rather unscrupulously, where he could see himself telling Aunt Beth that little Billy was missing. He knew only too well how Aunt Beth would react to such devastating news. "Missing? What on earth do you mean that little Billy is missing? Sam, I asked you to look after my son for me. Your mother assured me you could be trusted, and now Billy is missing. How could you have been so irresponsibly negligent? I asked you to do this one thing for me, to stay awake all night and to keep your eyes pinned on little Billy. But you failed me. I hope you're proud of yourself, Sam. I'll never ever trust you again. Never. You've been such a dreadful disappointment to me. If we cannot find Billy, I shall never forgive you as long as I live. You can do this, Sam, he told himself. Get a grip. No one is watching you. You have to find little Billy or Aunt Beth will kill you. Billy, he called out again. Billy, are you there? It's me, Sam. Those bad men have gone. I promise you, you're safe now. You can come out of your hiding place. All of a sudden, Sam saw a pair of yellow eyes staring at him through overhanging leafy foliage. Those eyes belonged to somebody formidably large. But what it was, Billy's darkest nightmares could not entertain. What the hell, he thought. What on earth is that? The gargantuan, dark, lumpy shadow of a colossal, ambiguously indistinct being gracefully glided towards him, swinging 2 pairs of overlong arms. The yellow eyes were fixed directly on him. Sam felt certain that he had become dinner for this outlandish creature, whatever it was, and that he had only seconds left to live on this planet, as if his life was now ebbing away very quickly, like when you're in a car accident and your life flashes before you, and deep in your gut you feel as if you're not going to get out of this situation alive. Everything for Sam seemed to happen in slow motion, as if every vital second had become agonizingly long, and in those cruel, excruciating seconds he peacefully surrendered to what was about to unfold, as his fate was galvanizing the flow of his life, which was now out of his control. It was pointless trying to fight against it. All Sam wanted to do in the very beginning of this outlandishly absurd encounter was to run away. His heart had been thundering violently in his chest. He had thought he would pass out, faint and collapse on the forest floor. He had tried so desperately to run away, but his legs would not oblige his pleading requests. They felt like cinder blocks beneath him that were anchored to one spot, unable to move an inch. "Run!" came the authoritative voice in his head. "Run!" But all the red warning lights of danger going off in his mind, like fireworks on the 4th of July, did little to propel him forward. Instead, he stood on the forest floor, like a rather redundant firework that refused to take off into the sky, even after it was ignited with a match. It would seem in seconds an inexplicable peace overcame him, and he physically relaxed, as if he had chosen just to let go, like someone who's been holding their breath under the water for far too long, and then finally they draw in that life-giving oxygen when they find an air hole, and they feel only relief to inhale that fresh air. The creature was now standing feet away from him, studying him inquisitively, and in the bright, blazing light of his torch, Sam was in no doubt about what he was seeing. It was a Bigfoot. Sam had always thought that such cryptid creatures existed only in fictitious legends, made up by the indigenous people from the Americas, many who claimed to have absurd encounters with such outer-worldly mysterious things, and talked about these strange phenomenon, and creatures like the Wendigo, skinwalkers, and Bigfoots, of course. He'd read stories about such bizarre encounters, but he always took such legends with a pinch of salt. He was of the opinion that if such beings really existed, then there would be more documented evidence about them. But now he realized, in this quintessential moment, that things can indeed exist in our reality, even when we fail to see them. Sam realized his encounter with this extraordinary creature would be forever burnt into his memory with an indelible insistence, for he realized the Bigfoot was very much real. He felt no fear. He sensed the Bigfoot was benign, and her intentions towards him were certainly not nefarious. She seemed benevolent. If she intended to hurt him, she'd have done so already. Sam realized the Bigfoot was female, for a couple of small pert breasts were discernible beneath the thick thatch of dark hair that covered her entire body generously. Her face was remarkably human-looking. Sam was taken aback that the creature had pronounced cheekbones, a flat aquatic nose, a pyramid-shaped head, and in truth She was like a human being, but massive in size, covered in hair, with overlong arms, ponderous shoulders, and a body that was rippled with muscle. A body that was burly and big, but the Bigfoot's gait was at the same time both nimble and extremely graceful. Sam found himself inexplicably drawn to looking directly into the creature's amber eyes, and when he did this he heard the discernible words in his head, spoken to him telepathically, in a commanding but sweet female voice. "Follow me. I'll take you to the child you're looking for." Sam found himself caught up under a hypnotic-like trance, as the magnetism the Bigfoot exuded was absolutely gripping. He unhesitantly, without even so much as batting an eyelash, promptly followed the Bigfoot through the woods, wondering if this was all an illusory dream, from which he would surely awaken. But when he pinched himself ever so hard, he realized that this was no dream at all. But he had no clue where the Bigfoot was taking him. The Bigfoot stopped at a tree. She let out a shrill whistle. Sam heard some rustling sounds, and then he saw his little cousin Billy, peering nervously down at them through the leafy foliage of the tree, where he was literally sitting on a tree branch, almost as if it was a swing. The Bigfoot then reached out to lift little Billy off the branch and put him ever so gently onto the ground. She took Billy's hand in hers, and then Billy saw Sam, so he ran to his cousin. Sam was thrilled to see little Billy. The relief in seeing him safe and well almost brought tears to his eyes. He looked up into the Bigfoot's eyes rather questioningly. She communicated with him, again in this extraordinary telepathic exchange, that Sam would never be able to forget. "The poor little one! He was wandering around the woods so aimlessly. I could feel his fear. I had to help him. I had to intervene. It grieved my heart to feel his distress. He couldn't see where he was going. He was confused and disorientated, for your kind have dim eyes. I brought him to this tree to keep him safe in the branches here. I knew you would arrive shortly, and here you are." Sam gathered little Billy into his arms, holding him tightly. "Are you all right, Billy? What happened? Why did you run into the woods like that?" "I was really scared," said Billy. "There were 2 bad men in the house. I saw them bending the window bars back, crawling into the kitchen. I knew they were bad men. I could tell that they were up to no good. I came into the woods and the hairy lady hid me in the tree so that the men couldn't hurt me. The hairy lady's very nice. She said she wouldn't let anybody go near me." "The bad men have gone," said Sam reassuringly. "It's safe to come back home now, I promise." "Follow me," said the Bigfoot, throwing little Billy over her shoulders. "I'll take you back to the house." Sam found himself following the Bigfoot, who was carrying Billy. Billy was squealing with delight, as if this was all a wonderful game. When they reached the edge of the woods overlooking his uncle and aunt's house, the Bigfoot put little Billy down. Then she nodded at Sam and Billy, and then glided away. Sam took his cousin's hand in his, and they both walked straight to the fire escape to get back into the house by way of the stairs. "Are you sure the bad men are gone?" asked Billy. "I'm sure," said Sam. "They won't be coming back. I can promise you that." Sam looked at his cousin Billy thoughtfully and said, "If your mum knew the bad men got into the house tonight, Billy, then she'd be very upset, wouldn't she?" Billy nodded. "She'd be sad. She wouldn't like it. She doesn't like strangers talking to me." "Well, you don't like it when your mum gets upset, do you, Billy?" "No, I hate it when she gets upset because she cries." "I think she'll cry, Billy, if she knows the men got into the house." Billy nodded. "I think she would cry," he admitted. "Do you think you can keep a secret, Billy? Just between you and me?" "I can keep secrets," said Billy proudly. "I kept Letitia's secret at school. I never told anybody that she stole the teacher's Mickey Mouse pencil that she got from Disneyland. She begged me not to tell anyone she'd stolen it, and I never did." "Well, there you go then. I don't want you to tell your mum about the 2 bad men that climbed through the kitchen window, because if you tell your mum that, she'll cry, and you don't want her to cry, do you? So do you think you can keep a secret? Billy looked rather solemn and finally nodded. I won't tell her anything, I promise. Cross my heart, hope to die if I tell a lie. Good boy, Billy. I knew I could trust you. Sam tucked his cousin Billy into bed, and the moment the little boy's head hit the pillow, he had fallen into a deep sleep. The poor little mite was absolutely exhausted. Sam then retreated to the kitchen to clear up the mess. He placed the duffel bag that Ernie and Trout had left behind in the yard shed, where he hid it discreetly behind some bags of compost and some rusty old tins of paint that had dried up a long time ago. He marvelled over the idiosyncratic events of the evening. Sam sat back comfortably on the white leather couch. He continued to read his Enid Blyton book, but alas, his mind was far away from the book that initially had been so gripping it had held his undivided attention. But the peculiar events of the evening had out-trumped even Enid Blyton, if that was at all possible. Not only had two bumbling idiots broken into Aunt Beth's house, but his cousin Billy had hidden in the woods and had been taken care of by a female Bigfoot. You just couldn't make all this stuff up. It was 2:30 on the dot when Uncle Dylan's white Mercedes rolled down the driveway. He could hear the engine stop, the sound of muffled voices, doors slamming, and the key being turned in the lock, as his aunt and uncle entered the house. Sam's heart began to twitch nervously when he heard his Aunt Beth running towards the library, where she stood in the doorway, looking questioningly at Sam. "Is everything all right, Sam? I hope my little Billy hasn't been giving you too much trouble this evening, and that he's been behaving himself," said Aunt Beth. "You have been checking up on him during the night, I hope. Every half hour as you promised to do so." "But of course I have, Aunt Beth. And your little son is absolutely fine." "You gave him his dinner at 5 o'clock, did you?" "But of course, Aunt Beth. I grilled the dinosaur chicken nuggets like you asked me to, and I didn't even burn them. I cooked the oven-fried chips for you on a baking tray, and I steamed the broccoli for him." "And did he eat his broccoli? It's so important he eats his greens." "Yes, he did, Aunt Beth." Sam could not help smiling inwardly, as he remembered how cheeky little Billy had eaten up all his cookie dough ice cream, and then pulled out of his cheeks the flaccid-looking florets of broccoli. "Did you read him a bedtime story? You did say you would." "But of course I did, Aunt Beth. I did everything you asked me to." Aunt Beth came into the library. "Oh, I'm so relieved everything is fine. You have no idea how worried I've been. I'm not used to leaving Billy in somebody else's charge. You must forgive me, Sam, for being so pedantic. Sometimes I just can't help myself. I get overwrought with worry, you know." Uncle Dylan was standing in the doorway of the library. He grinned widely from ear to ear. "Honestly, what is your aunt like, Sam? I must apologize for her. She overreacts all the time. I told her Billy would be absolutely fine in your charge, and it seems I was not wrong." "Did you enjoy the party, Aunt Beth?" Billy asked. "Oh, it was lovely, Billy. Thank you for asking. Very kind of you. Yes, we had such fun. The food was excellent, the entertainment marvellous, and your uncle's speech was absolutely amazing. He made everybody laugh." "So you weren't scared, Uncle Dylan, when you spoke in front of all those people?" "Of course I was terrified, but your Aunt Beth stoically stood at my side, and I soon forgot how nervous I was. Everybody said my speech was wonderful." "Thank you for looking after Billy, Sam. Your mother told me I could trust you with my life, and it seems she wasn't wrong about that. You didn't let me down, as you faithfully promised you wouldn't." Aunt Beth thrust a wad of notes into Sam's hands. "That's for doing such a sterling job. I'm very proud of you, Sam. You've earned every single penny." "If only you knew the half of it," thought Sam to himself, who was glad to find that the following morning Billy made no mention of the bad men that had broken into the house through the kitchen window. But he came to the breakfast table in his pyjamas, with some leaves in his hair, and his pyjamas looking really rather filthy. "Goodness gracious me, Billy," said Aunt Beth. "Why are your pyjamas so dreadfully dirty? Why are there leaves in your hair?" "Me and Sam were playing a game," said little Billy.
It was later that afternoon that Billy began to indiscriminately draw pictures of the female Bigfoot he had encountered in the woodgrove the night before. Aunt Beth began to inquire about the picture, because it was rather unorthodox, unlike anything that Billy had ever drawn before. "What is it you've drawn there?" she asked. "This is the nice lady with the long hair," he said proudly. "She lives in the woods over there," he said, pointing to the woods. Sam began to inwardly panic. Please God, he thought, Billy, don't you dare tell Aunt Beth what happened last night. But he needn't have worried, because Billy didn't give much information out. "Does she now?" said Aunt Beth with a twinkle in her eyes, clearly amused by Billy's explanation. Sam was relieved that Aunt Beth thought her son was drawing a fictitious character in crayon that rather resembled a bear. Aunt Beth studied the picture inquisitively and smiled. "So what's the nice lady with the hair called, Billy?" she asked. Billy looked up at his mother and grinned. "Her name is Inina." "Inina?" said Aunt Beth, looking perplexed. "Where did you get such an extraordinary name from like that, Billy? I don't know anyone called Inina." "I told you," said little Billy, looking a little peeved, as if he thought his mother was really stupid for not knowing the name. "I told you her name is Inina. It means Lady of the Flower." "Oh, really?" said Aunt Beth, looking rather perturbed that her little boy had actually given the hairy lady's name a meaning. Where had her son come out with all these bizarre claims, she wondered. "You've got quite the imagination on you, love, haven't you?" she said, ruffling her 7-year-old's hair rather affectionately. Billy looked very annoyed. He hated it when his mother messed his hair up like this. "You don't believe me, Mummy, do you? I'm telling you the truth. Her name is Inina." "Don't put words in my mouth, Billy. I never said I didn't believe you, did I?" said Aunt Beth, trying to be kind. "The Lady of the Flower. What an unusual name. I wonder why she's called that." "It's 'cause when she was born, her father put a flower in her hand. She really liked it. So her dad would bring her a flower every day. She liked flowers, so her daddy said that she was the Lady of the Flower. She loves flowers a lot, you see. She's always picking them for herself." "I see," said Aunt Beth, looking rather puzzled by her son's impassionate outburst about this so-called hairy lady that he had drawn. She'd never seen her son so enthused by an imaginary friend, and in the months that followed he kept drawing these pictures of the hairy lady. A bizarre behaviour that continued for some time, leaving Aunt Beth somewhat bewildered, so much so, in fact, that she shared the odd enigmatic matter with her sister Julie. "I don't know what's going on with little Billy, Julie. Really, I don't. Ever since your Sam came to stay with us, Billy's been on about a hairy lady called Inina, who he insists lives in the woods. At first Billy was interested in Mickey Mouse, but he never talks about Mickey Mouse anymore. These days it's all about Inina. Inina this, Inina that, Inina the next thing. I even asked Billy's teacher at school if she'd ever heard of the name Inina. She said maybe Billy is talking about a girl at school called Nina. They often play together, I believe." "Well, I wouldn't worry about it, Beth, if I was you," Sam's mother had chuckled. "Kids, you know what they're like. They always go through phases, don't they? When they're fixated about something. I mean, when I was growing up, if you remember, it was Snoopy that got my attention." "Well, I suppose you're right," said Aunt Beth. "But it's still rather bizarre, don't you think?" "No, Beth, I don't, actually. I think kids naturally have wild imaginations on them. And it's something we should actually encourage rather than challenge." It was weeks later that Aunt Beth noticed the window in her kitchen had been tampered with, and the bars bent backwards. But luckily she didn't connect the dots, and believed someone had attempted to break into the house. So the very next day, an alarm was installed, and it would seem Uncle Dylan's fabulous collection of books was now relatively safe, especially from Ernie and Trout, who had lightly told everybody that would listen that there was a tiger loitering around the Valinsky property. Billy's account, 23 years later. "I was 30 years old when my mother asked me to house sit for her," 2 beloved, very soppy King Charles Spaniels, that I hasten to say were as devoted to her as she clearly was to them. My mother took them with her everywhere she went, as if they were joined to her hip. My parents were now going abroad to Paris, England, Portugal, and Spain for a much-needed overseas holiday. I'm sure it was my father that finally persuaded my mother to come along on the trip, but my mother was reluctant to leave her beloved dogs behind. Understandably, given my mother's incredible devotion and commitment to those dogs, she did not want them to be taken care of by a complete stranger, so she recruited me for the job. She asked me to take 3 weeks off work and insisted on paying me very well to watch over her beloved dogs. My mother regarded those 2 King Charles Spaniels of hers as her babies. She adored those dogs, almost as if they were her very own children. I was now living in Detroit, where I was a manager of an insurance company. I always enjoyed the privilege of coming home for the weekends, as I had grown up in such a beautiful environment, surrounded by the rich pickings of the natural world. When I was in Detroit, I was always rather reminded of what I was missing when I was away from home, so I'd visit my parents regularly for the odd weekend. My mother took it very hard when I left home for good. She was so devoted to me, and for a long time she suffered from empty nest syndrome, which afflicted her very badly. She rarely did struggle to let me go, and made no secret of this fact. I had been her entire world. Her gynecologist described my birth all those years ago, when I was born, quite the miracle. It was more recently, about 2 years ago or so. My father decided to fix my mother's depression in a practical, pragmatic way, as her continuous low moods were causing him great disquiet. My father naturally loved the bones of my mother. He didn't know what he could do to bring a smile back to her face. I guess with me out of the way, and no longer the central focus of her life, she felt as if her life had completely lost all its purpose. My mother's flagging and rather wilting enthusiasm for everyday life had sunk to an all-time low. The meds the doctor had prescribed her failed to lift her out of her lugubrious melancholia and pessimistic outlook that seemed to drag my mother down into a muddy mire, almost like quicksand. One day my father returned home with 2 small, adorable bundles of fur in his arms. He had brought my mother 2 King Charles Spaniels, after learning about a good friend of his, whose spaniel had given birth to puppies. My mother called her 2 spaniels Pippa, the other Barker. It was the best thing my father could have ever done for my mother, bringing those dogs home. Her depression dissipated in almost seconds, and she fell head over heels in love with the dogs. I hasten to say she soon forgot about how grievously upset she was that I was no longer living at home, for she had 2 bundles of fluff to focus on. Pippa and Barker unabashedly filled the hole in my mother's life, better than I could ever have done. My father was always saying that the day he brought those dogs home was the day that he got his wife back, and I believe that was true. I think the only regret he had was he hadn't thought of doing this a long time ago. In truth, I only had a cat growing up as a child, although we did get an old rescue dog called Pluto, who was so arthritic and very old, he only lived for about 3 years. "Sweetheart," my mother had said to me, "I know it's a big ask, and I shouldn't probably be asking you this, but I really need you to look after Pippa and Barker for me. Your father, you know what he's like. He's insistent we go abroad for a couple of weeks. Well, 3 weeks, actually, to be precise. We're going around Europe. I really don't want to go because of my babies. It's too awful for words, leaving them behind. But I can hardly take them with me, can I? I can't possibly have anyone else be trusted to care for them. Pippa is so particular, you know, about how she likes her chicken poached. And I know that Barker likes his steak rather on the rare side. If I tell someone else to do these things for my babies,
They'll think I'm a silly old woman who's over the top. They'll probably eat the steak for themselves and go off and buy Pippa and Barker commercial dog food. The very idea gives me a panic attack. It's enough that I'm going away, leaving my dogs for 3 weeks, which is the hardest thing that I could possibly have to do. But then to see them not fed right, that would just break my heart. You may laugh that my mother fed her dogs like 2 human beings, with plenty of vegetables, quality meat, and certain grains. They had never eaten dog pellets a day in their lives, but their coats were so glossy, the vet even inquired on what they were eating. Only the best, my mother would say. Only the best for my dogs. So you want me to take 3 weeks off work, Mum, and watch over the spaniels for you? I asked her. Oh, I'm so sorry, Billy. I really am. You know what your father's like. He told me asking you this favour was completely unreasonable, that I couldn't expect you to give up your job for 3 weeks on my behalf. But if you looked after them, it would mean the world to me, because I can't trust anybody else to do a good job, if you know what I mean. Mum, of course I'll do it. You know me. I'll do anything for you. You've made so many sacrifices for me over the years. Besides, if the truth be told, it'll be fun coming back home for 3 weeks or so. Don't you worry. I will make Barker's steak rare, and poach Pippa's chicken just like she likes it. Oh, sweetheart, what a weight off my mind. You have no idea how relieved I am to hear you saying that. I now can enjoy my trip, relax, and I won't have to worry so much about the dogs. You're an absolute gem. It was on my second day spent at my parents' house that I decided to go through the big closet in my bedroom to look for an old train set that I'd thoroughly enjoyed playing with as a boy. I hoped it was still around, but I doubted my mother would have thrown it away. I knew it would be nostalgic to see it again, and I rather wondered if it still worked. There was a top shelf in my closet, covered in layers of thick dust, that was out of arm's reach, but that was where many of my things I'd enjoyed using as a boy were stored. I removed a chair from under the dressing table and pulled it over to the closet, so that I could drag out some of the boxes of things that contained my childhood memorabilia. I guess my mother never had the heart to throw any of this stuff away. I was relieved to see that everything was very much intact, and neatly stacked as well. The shelf was full of old trinkets, report cards, certificates, little dinky cars, buses and trucks, marbles and all kinds of board games. I pulled out a box that was marked Billy's drawings. It was covered in dust and cobwebs. I nearly discarded it, but then I noticed some of my drawings I'd done in crayon as a child, and curiosity got the better of me, as it's quite interesting to go back and review old pictures you did as a child. I think I was expecting to see the traditional things that children draw, like stick figures representing human beings, suns, trees, houses, rainbows, you know the kind of thing. And that is invariably what I found most of the time. I smiled contentedly to myself as I glanced through these pictures I'd drawn. But then I discovered some unusual pictures that made me examine them a little closer. In many of these drawings, I had drawn a woman covered in hair, a very, very large woman. And at the bottom of my picture, I had written the words, Inina, and then, Lady of the Flower. It's amazing how in that moment, memories buried beneath the cobwebs of my mind, like Christmas decorations stacked haphazardly in cardboard boxes and stored in the attic, long since forgotten about and abandoned, came tumbling into my head. And I then rediscovered memories I'd long since forgotten about, like when you taste something you have not eaten for many years, and then you remember all the flavours and how much you actually liked the taste. I stared in incredulous bemusement at the picture I had drawn as a boy. The flashbacks began to play out in my head, and then the memory of the strangest, most scary night of my life as a 7-year-old boy erupted in my mind like a colourful Catherine wheel, being ignited by a flame and showing off all its beautiful colours as it whirls around and around. I had been lying back in my bed that night, which was under a window on the second floor of our home, with fabulous views overlooking the backyard and the wood grove beyond that stretched out over a wide area like a sizable yawn. It was a habitat boasting a lovely collection of trees and indigenous wildlife. I was always a light sleeper, still am as a matter of fact. I tend to wake up with the slightest interruption or disturbance, like when a couple of raccoons are ferreting around in the dustbin. I'd heard footsteps creeping on the gravel pathway outside our home, and I'd woken with quite the start, feeling fear shooting through me. I guessed someone was loitering around our premises. I had stood up on my bed in my Mickey Mouse pyjamas and peered curiously out of the window. I took in a sharp breath when I observed two men wearing black masks over their faces. In the moonlight they were bending back the bars of the kitchen window, using some kind of tool, and then they both crawled into our kitchen. I called out to my cousin Sam for help. I knew he was reading a book in the library, but he failed to answer me. The library was in close proximity to my bedroom, only downstairs, so he should have heard my calls. I was so afraid because my mother warned me about bad men, and I knew these two men who had broken into our house and hiding their faces behind masks were up to no good. They had to be bad. I did consider hiding myself under the bed or in the closet in the bedroom, but then I knew if the bad men were looking for me, they would easily find me there. I decided to escape the house by way of the fire exit, which my mother told me to use in the event of a fire. At 7 years old, I was absolutely terrified of the dark, but so much more afraid of these two horrible men that had broken into our house. So I ran to the woods to hide. I figured I'd find my favourite tree there that I often climbed during daylight hours, and I would stay there until my parents returned home. I was sure my cousin Sam would also be hiding from the horrible men, and I remembered hoping he'd found a good hiding place for himself. I didn't know what the men would do to him. I had no idea why they'd even broken into our house. It was when I was in the woods I became terribly affrighted. It was so incredibly dark, I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I didn't have any torch with me to help me navigate my way through the trees. I couldn't even climb my favourite tree, because I couldn't see anything. I began to cry like kids often do when they're terribly afraid. That was when I saw Inina for the first time. I had no way of knowing she was a Bigfoot. In my 7-year-old eyes, she was like a cuddly teddy bear, a lady covered in hair. And I knew when I laid eyes on her that she was a friend and that I could trust her. I didn't have any preconceived ideas about her, but I trusted her at once. I don't know how I had a conversation with her, but I did, and she was as human as you or me. I was so happy to see her. She spoke to me in a strange, rather peculiar language, but I knew everything she was saying. She told me everything was going to be all right, and that I must not be scared, because she would look after me. She asked me what my name was. I told her my name was Billy. She asked me what Billy meant. I said I didn't know the meaning of my name. This seemed to shock her. She said it was peculiar I didn't know the meaning. She said all names had energy, and these meanings were powerful, and what you called your child could ultimately affect their destiny. She told me her name was Inina, which means Lady of the Flower.
My father called me Inina, because after I was born, he was so pleased he put a flower in my hand. My mother tried to take the flower away from me, but I wouldn't let her. I refused to let the flower go. I loved the flower so much that my father kept bringing me a flower every day. He said to my mother,
"She is the Lady of the Flower."
"Sometimes it takes a while for my kind to decide on a name, you see, for a child. It's a serious business for us, and the parents often look for signs from nature to give them a clue as to what to call the child."
When Inina told me the story of how she acquired her name, I felt rather jealous and envious of her, and especially when I asked my mother what my name meant and why she'd called me Billy. She said, "I don't know what your name means. I just called you Billy because I liked the name, that's all." I told Anina that I wanted to hide in my special tree from the bad men in my home. So she took me to the tree that I liked and put me up in the branches. The Bigfoot could see so clearly at night, whereas in the darkness I could never have climbed that tree without her help. I told her about the 2 bad men in my house, and I told her why I needed to hide. "I want to wait until Mummy and Daddy get back, and then I'll be safe." She told me she knew the horrible men would go, and when they did she'd bring me home to safety, and that she would keep a watch over me. It was later on in the evening that Anina guided my cousin Sam to the tree where I was hiding. I was so happy to see Sam was safe and the men had not harmed him. Sam assured me that the 2 horrible men had gone, that it was safe to come home. Anina had taken such good care of me that night. She had made me feel safe, and I really warmed to her. When you're 7, you never judge people or animals that look different to you. You're completely accepting of them, as you are with any fairy tale character in a novel. I had made a special friend that night, and I certainly hoped I would see Anina again, but regretfully I never did. I would draw a plethora of pictures of Anina. I told my mother about her, that she was called the Lady of the Flower, and that she was very real.
"She's got lots and lots of hair. She lives in the woods."
My mother, of course, never believed a word of it, which grievously upset me. My mother thought I was making up fictitious fairy tales, as parents so often do. I had sworn faithfully to my cousin Sam that I wouldn't tell my mother about the bad men that had broken into our house that night. He assured me that if my mother knew such a thing, that she would be very, very upset, and I didn't want my mother to be upset, because when she was sad about anything, she became very highly strung. Sam assured me the men would never come back again. They believed there was a dangerous tiger in our house, loitering around the library. Sam admitted he'd played the tape that he'd played me earlier on in the evening, of a lion's roars, and the men were so scared off by the sound that they fled in a tearing hurry. As I looked at the pictures I had drawn of Anina in crayon, I found myself becoming surprisingly quite emotional, as I recalled the night with a vivid clarity, when Anina had taken charge over me. It had been so scary being swaddled by the darkness of the woodgrove, but Anina had made me feel safe. I do recall drawing those pictures as a child. I remember on numerous occasions my mother would find a single flower lying out on the Adirondack chair on our patio, the one that I would sit on when we were eating al fresco. My mother would always wonder where the single flower would come from. I would say,
"Anina must have left it for me. She put it on my chair. She's the lady of the flower I told you about. She lives in the woods."
I think my mother believed I was clandestinely picking the flower and deliberately putting it on my chair, but I knew differently. I think Anina was trying to remind me she was very much still around. She was watching over me, and she hadn't forgotten about me. I would lovingly take the flower, placing it in a glass of water, and I would put it on my nightstand. It was my mother that would throw it away when the flower died. These flowers mysteriously appeared for many years. They abruptly stopped being delivered to the Adirondack chair, and sometimes even to my treehouse, where I would frequently hang out after I'd left home. It was later that afternoon, while on house-sitting duty for my mother, that I took my mother's 2 beloved dogs for a walk in the woodgrove. That was when I found myself thinking about Anina, and the drawings I'd drawn of her in crayon as a 7-year-old boy. I even found the tree in the woodgrove where she'd hidden me that night. I realized it had grown exponentially, far larger than I ever remembered it to be. I'd often asked my father to make me a treehouse in that tree, but he said it was too deep in the woods, so he built me a treehouse in the backyard, close to the house in an old oak tree. The tree house remained in reasonably good condition all these years later, and it was also in there that I would occasionally find a flower that Anina had left me. So I believe over the years she had almost certainly been watching over me. I was wondering privately to myself what had become of Anina. I couldn't believe I'd forgotten all about her, for when I was a 7-year-old boy, I had been completely bedazzled and enchanted by my encounter with her. Was she still alive, I wondered? Did she still reside in the woods? Was she long gone from our part of the world? Maybe she was living in another state and had moved far away from here. I was sure Bigfoots must travel over vast distances by foot, rather like the gypsies used to do in their caravans in the days of old. I do recall I never saw her again after that idiosyncratic encounter I had with her, but I do recall her saying to me that if I ever needed her, all I had to do was call out her name, and she would come at once. As you can imagine, my mother's 2 King Charles Spaniels were 2 lovable balls of energy that afternoon, barking excitedly as they tore through the woods, like 2 rockets in take-off. I'm sure they must be missing my mother while she was abroad. But the great thing about dogs, I've come to realize, is they're extremely resilient. They live in the moment. I was amused to watch both spaniels ebulliently shooting after a couple of rabbits who scuttled away hurriedly, diving into their burrows for cover. I could not help but have a bit of a chuckle at the dogs' expense, as they were so disappointed they couldn't catch those bundles of fluff that had disappeared into their burrows. The dogs were lifting their legs indiscriminately over the forest foliage to mark their territory. I was pretty certain there wasn't a single tree left in the grove that had not been anointed by their spray. My mother took them in the woods all the time, because she said they enjoyed running around to their heart's content, and it was great exercise for them. The woods were rarely beautiful on this unassuming spring afternoon. It really was wonderful to be away from Detroit. I felt as if I was on holiday being back at my childhood home. It was all rather nostalgic for me. I enjoyed having the house to myself, and hanging around lackadaisically with my mother's dogs on home turf. The temperature was reasonably warm, but not warm enough for me to be wearing a short-sleeved T-shirt, I have to say. There was an eclectic mix of deciduous and evergreen trees in the wood grove, some covered in splatterings of small new leaves, while others proudly boasted branches ablaze with pretty ethereal white blooms. Spring had announced her prompt arrival. It had always been my quintessential favourite time of the year. I was enjoying the sunbeams that meandered through the branches, and basking in the warmth they offered, as after a gruelling, rather oppressive winter, with days devoid of sunshine, I was appreciating spring like never before. The winding footpaths through the trees were rocky, covered with a nightmare of rooty appendages that I noticed had got progressively worse over the years. They seemed quite happy to spread their knotty tentacles all across the forest floor, but it was easy enough to navigate my way through the woods on this lovely afternoon without falling victim to their insidious snares. It was as I was navigating my way through the grove that I thought to myself, "Why don't you call Anina? I mean, what harm can that do? I know it's been years, but why not just give it a shot? I mean, what have I got to lose?" I told myself there was no way I would ever see Anina again. I was deluding myself if I thought that. Years had gone by. The Bigfoot was long gone by now, and for all I know she might not even be alive. And even if she was, what were the chances she would be hanging out in my parents' woodgrove after all these years? I was pretty sure Bigfoots were nomadic and followed their food sources, so they moved between states, where they remained elusive, which was the reason for their successful survival. I was sure Bigfoots must have a hard life, so anything could have happened to Anina. I thought to myself, what the hell? And I began to call out her name, just on the faint off chance that this hairy friend from my past might show her face to me again, and how I wished with all my heart that she would. Both of my mother's spaniels looked at me, as if I was completely off my rocker, and maybe I was. "Inina!" I called out. "Inina, are you there? It's me, Billy. Inina!" I was met with just the innocent, tuneful calls of the birdsong that was bright and cheery on this afternoon, but there was no sign of Inina. I felt rather foolish when I returned home, feeling disappointed that I hadn't encountered her, but I knew I was being ridiculous. I was 30 years old, for goodness sake. I hadn't seen Inina for many years. I'd even forgotten about her. And yet I felt like a kid who had been short-changed at the fair because I'd been given the smallest cookie, and everybody else had walked away with cookies twice the size of mine, covered in all kinds of delicious treats. I told myself I was lucky to have ever met Inina, and I should be thankful for that. But I was so longing to see her again, once the memory of her had returned to me in the way that it did. That night I fell into a very deep, contented sleep, with both dogs in bed with me. They were burrowed under the covers, Barker resting his head over my feet. They were the perfect leg warmers, because although it was spring, the nights could be decidedly fresh. It was later on that night that both dogs suddenly jumped out of the covers and began to bark excitedly as they dashed over to the door of the bedroom, with tails wagging profusely. That was when I heard the strange banging sound. It was definitely coming from the front door. The rapping made me feel decidedly nervous. Who could be paying me a visit at this late hour of the night, I wondered. I opened the bedroom door very gingerly, while both dogs scooted ahead of me, charging like greased lightning down the staircase, through the passage, straight to the front door, with me following behind rather reluctantly. I had put on a dressing gown and slippers. The dogs continued to bark. They were scratching at the door frantically, very eager to get out, but I reprimanded them, telling them, be quiet now. Hello, I called out. Is anybody there? But there was no answer. I knew someone had to have been rapping at the door, so I opened it very gingerly, taking care not to let the dogs escape. There was a soft breeze blowing on this moonlit night, and that was when I saw it. There on the front doorstep was a single flower. Inina, I thought, picking up the flower to study it closely. My heart flooded with warm feelings for her. There was no doubt in my mind the flower left on the front doorstep had come from Inina. She must have responded to my calls after all. Was she here, I wondered? I glanced towards the wood grove, eagerly scrutinizing the dark silhouettes of the tall, lofty trees. And then I saw her. Her yellow eyes were focused on me. I knew it was her. My heart pounded excitedly in my chest as she glided towards me. She was exactly as I remembered her. Tears came into my eyes as I saw her. She came up to me and patted me on the back very gently, and we embraced in what I would describe as a clinging kind of hug. She smelled of the woods, and her hair was soft, wavy, and warm. She spoke to me in her indigenous dialect, but I hasten to say I understood every single word.
Kilakwi, haki sala natala, kolosopolashi, aki kwasana. You called me. I came. I was a long way away from here, so it took me a while to get here. I'm sorry for the delay. My, you have grown a lot since I last saw you. You're now a very handsome young man.
You heard me? From a long way off? I asked incredulously. How could you have heard me call you?
I heard it in my heart,
she said, tapping her chest.
When you thought of me, I heard you, and then you called my name in the woods, and I heard that too. What was it you wanted from me, Billy? Was it important?
I flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry that I called you Inina. I just wanted to see if you were still around. I remember how good you were to me on that night, when I was so fearful as a 7-year-old boy.
Kilatika kwasa, Billy, o kolopatila, isanaswa, kolomota. It's kind of you to think of me, Billy. I've often thought of you.
You see, I haven't forgotten your name. Did you find out what it means from your mother?
I shook my head sorrowfully. My mother doesn't know what it means, I said. I asked her why she called me Billy, but she said she liked the name. Inina shook her head sorrowfully.
Kila tika sa kolopoto la sika imanakila Billy olopoto. You don't call someone by a name because you like it. You choose the name that aligns with their energy and their life path. Don't you worry, I've got a good name for you, Billy,
she said, her treacle-coloured eyes growing yellow with enthusiasm. You have? What is it? I asked.
Kilatika Bagata.
Bagata, I said. What does that mean?
It means bravely innocent, because that's what you were, Billy. When I met you in the woodgrove, when you ran away from home to hide in a dark place. That makes you a noble warrior. It's a great name for you. Now I must go. Be well, young man.
She tapped me, turned around, and glided away. And I knew in that instant that house-sitting for my mother's dogs would be something I would never, ever forget. So there you are. That's my story.
That was an incredible story, and I enjoyed it so much. Isn't it incredible that he met Inina again after all these years? And they were able to tune into each other's energy. What an incredible story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.